This meeting orders 6 o'clock.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Marty, will you take the roll call?
Mary Jo Rogowski.
Here.
Mary Jo Radcliffe. Here. Tom Epps.
Here.
Troy Webb.
Here.
Nick Helsted.
Here.
Ann Deemer.
Here.
And Brad Dobbs.
Here. And has this meeting been verified? Or excuse me, please verify that the meeting has been publicly noticed.
It has.
Thank you. All right, I'd like to make a motion to move a couple of items up. 8.5, which is the London Theater lighting. 6.1, which is the focus on purpose. And 7.2, which is the social work report, because we have visitors here tonight that would like to leave a little bit early. So I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So we will start with 5.1.
Board commendation.
Board commendation.
So we're going to start with a video which is going to help you understand what our board commendation is about. So Jill's going to tee this up and then we'll talk a little bit about it. Subtitles, just so you know.
Sheknagare, Wechini Skygi, Mana Wahawayanaga, Kokhoanaija, Wopahoi. Kokhoanana Wechkinegi, Nanina Khere Akjoy Eske, Sihapegi, Nanina Koreske Najikchene, Koreske Harme Hijan Kira Hipa Hapina. Einigting Yakiwianaga, Pejija Dae Hawi. Mars Kok Paraparch Khadeja, Pejia Geja Kerewianaga, Nanina Eja Upachoi. Nanina Khere Hawi, Sichji Kherekje Eske. Nina Hadaki, Uiro Haija, Upachuyanaga, Edu Khede Hawi. Snichke Eske Hawi. Al Serech Khede Hawiyanaga, Agaida, Hai Serechke, Eske Hawi. Nanina Jige Hadaki, Jige Rech Hunigija, Eda Upachuyanaga, Cheja Hanya Diwi. Nech Hunigija, Eja Akerewayanaga, Jige Khede Hawi. Ashkegi, Ashkechchi Yakarawi. We don't call engineer we are we dakach we guzi janaga. I dramada nagare Yahweh. I dramada nagare, Ozi zebra he goes naksh. O dakach wekara naga, Ozi zebra pigi, na dani juzi zebra pigi. Reja, O Pachuianaga, what do you kuzwi? Wakisha Wigaja, Wido Kunana, Shure Wahawayanaga, Jige, Hilusha Aki Ajidawi. Mahu Agare, Jige, Eske Akchanawi Gajane, Wido Kunana, Chahaki Na Kikchane.
Would you leave the mute this? Jim, would you mind joining us up front? I have to tell you, through all of our years working with our kids in our conversations around how to infuse Native American history and culture, we have been all over the map with this, and it went from a Native American week to saying that's not authentic, let's do something better, right? And so now we infuse it in different times throughout the school year. The last 2 years with COVID, we have not had the opportunity to bring in so many of the guest speakers that we usually do. Last week we were able to celebrate the first mini powwow in 2 years, and oh my goodness, were people excited about it. But Shane, in the absence of that ability to bring people into the school, started making this video series, and this was one of them. The drum was probably my favorite. That one is just an amazing. And this is the first one, I think, where you were speaking the whole way through that had the subtitles. Before it was kind of a blend. Just the amount of culture and heritage that's captured in that video that we get to share with everyone is just amazing. We are so appreciative of that work. So appreciative of that. I would love to get a picture of you and Brad together. Is there anything that you wanted to say, or?
I wish I could thank all the people that helped me make these videos. I don't do it all by myself, so.
But it takes someone with the initiative to make it all happen and to wrap it up. Because again, we've talked about these for a long time, and they've never happened before. So thank you very, very, very much. Could we please get a Thank you so much.
Now moving on to the items we move forward. First will be the 5 London Theatre lighting project.
Justin Doherty is here to speak to this item as he has the most knowledge about it. We recently let out for some bids on some of the lighting equipment, and as you can imagine, something of that special nature, there's not very many vendors that will give you a quote back. So we did find two, which we were pleased with, and Justin will talk about each of those, and he'll talk about what happened and how we got here.
Without going too deep in the weeds that we're all lost.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it's not going to be as interesting as what we just watched, but I'll try. Would you like me to read the piece that I sent out to the board too?
You can just highlight it, you don't have to read it, they already
Okay.
received it, so if you want to just
so-
take points of it.
Basically, in mid-November last year, we suffered a catastrophic failure with the lighting system and multiple sound system components, and we called in an electrician to see what we could do, and he worked with the original manufacturer of the system that was installed 31 years ago when the building was built. And we were able to do a bypass of sorts, bypassing all the controls and everything else, the dimmer panels, everything else, to get us into kind of a limp mode that essentially gives us a scene that we can put up, meaning that we have lights on stage and we have house lighting. We can't really dim, we can't change lights, and actually, as things sit, the lights change and it kind of picks and decides what it wants to do each time it's started up. We recently had one or two system crashes where it crashed. Luckily, it came back online before the lights kicked out or anything else. Without that system operational, we don't have any emergency lighting or anything like that in there, and so we basically either have lights or we don't. So, let's see here. So we had talked a little bit about the possibility of it being an issue with lightning or something like that, but due to the lack that school is in session and the lack of use for the theater due to COVID, we weren't able to pinpoint an exact date of loss, as the insurance company would say it, so it's kind of hard to pinpoint or anything. And it also actually had worked for a little while with some issues until we had the failure in November. A couple points of the system. It is the original system that was installed 31 years ago. The last firmware or software update that I know was in 1997. And if we do have any other failure of this system, we will have no lights in the theater whatsoever. We will be inoperable. I think the only lights we have are at the back doors, and that's it. So basically, we've gotten quotes on the system, and the companies that I was dealing with had basically said that the technology that we have is vastly outdated, as to be expected with technology. There are several systems that have been in place since then in other places, locations, and they've gone past those. So we're looking at LED technology now as pretty much the only way to go. It's pretty much the only thing that these companies want to install. The upside is that and by the way, with the older systems, components are no longer manufactured, and even the replacement bulbs for the existing system, when I was able to replace them, we were not able to find the correct wattages because government mandates on lower wattages and more efficient lighting has come into play. And the new LED lighting fixtures only require about 1/3 to 1/12 of the energy of the existing incandescent fixtures. We also need fewer fixtures in general, since most of the LED stage lights are capable of running multiple colors individually. So they can run red, green, blue, amber right by themselves. We also have a higher lumen output or brightness from each fixture as well, due to the fact that it's not an old incandescent bulb with a thick colored glass lens that was used. I have two quotes here. The first one says GSL at the top, which is going to go for stage lighting. And then we have one from Metro Stage Lighting. To give you an idea of the efficiency and difference Right now, currently, we have 48 individual colored PAR lights, they call them, on each electrical row on the stage. And that's running around 18,000 watts total for those bulbs alone and those fixtures. The LED replacements are quoted at 7 per rail. And by my calculations are around 4,700 watts. So again, we're less than a third. The sight lights, which would be the larger lights on the back that up and down light the curtain at the back of the stage. For instance, those are 1,200 watt halogen bulbs, and there are 12 of those. And the sight lights on the bid from Gopher I think we stepped down to 9. So we go from 14,500 watts on those down to 900. So there's a tremendous amount of savings with the fixtures. And besides having more efficient fixtures through the LED technology, less fixtures since they're brighter, we also end up with better dimming technology where we don't have heat as a, when you dim something, you end up with heat as you're cutting it. And that heat is basically dissipated lost energy. The LEDs do not do that. The reason that it requires an entirely different system is because with incandescent lighting, it's done through voltage. With LED bulbs, they're dimmed electronically. So it's a completely different way of doing it. And there's no, unlike houses, residential, and like commercial, there's no easy way to retrofit and deal with that. You end up with variances and issues and low spots, high spots, different things like that. The bids that I received were both from 2 companies up in the Twin Cities. They're 2 of our nearest lighting companies, really good companies. And one is from Gopher Stage Lighting and the other is from Metro Sound and Lighting. The one from Gopher Stage Lighting, I feel is a much better quote. In my experience in talking with the company and dealing with them, they're much more detail oriented. They have a much better understanding. Dave, who I've been working with up there, actually stopped in at the theater and looked over things, so he's been on site already and went over quite a few ideas. It has labor in there for certain things. They do not do the electrical, they would say the permanent electrical for the building. So the electrical panels, the wiring up to the lighting rails would all have to be done by a subcontracted electrician. The lighting company is responsible for ordering everything, getting it to us, hooking everything up from light to light, programming everything, installing the software and the equipment that drives and runs it, and the training. That bid came in at $152,707. The bid from Metro, which is not near as precise, and it does not include labor for installation, consultation or programming. It also does not include any house lighting fixtures, which also have to replace and are important and also an expensive facet of the quote. And it does not include any intelligent lighting, which is another thing that Gopher has, is that with the newer lights, we're not able to only control dimming, or whether they're on and off. We're able to control the aperture, or essentially the zoom or focus of the light. So we can decide how large an area we want to light, and we can change the colors of all those lights as well. So it gives us a lot more control. Their bid, without tax, came in at $171,516. And again, those are both without electrical contractor and some other things. We do have a few pieces of sound equipment that seem to have suffered the same fate. I'm trying to, that's more my specialty than the lighting, so I'm trying to troubleshoot some of those and see what we can get repaired, if we can just send the boards out from some of the equipment. But some of those things will also need to be replaced. And they've served us well over the 31 years they've been in use, and myself and most people in the business would say they've long outlive their life expectancy as well. So the ballpark total for the project is around $250,000, we believe. We hope to come in a little bit lower than that, but we'll have to see. We're going to seek out grants, other funding sources and things as well if possible, but that's pretty much where we're at right now with it. So, does anybody have any questions?
Do you know the lead time for the lights? Approximately?
It's kind of tough. It's like everything else. They say basically the sooner you do it, the better off you are. Our hope would be to be able to do this during the summer months when school is not in session. Is everything has to come down, everything has to be rewired, we have to install everything new. Besides the training that I get and give to the student techs, I also have to spend a decent amount of time getting everything configured and different things too. So it sounds like it would be quite reasonable that we'd be able to do it this summer in talking to them. But yeah, time is of the essence. We just got these quotes I think about a week and a half or so ago. So we were kind of surprised we got them as soon as we did. Some things will change number-wise. There'll be some different fixtures and things like that, but I don't anticipate a tremendous difference. So.
We plan to take down the stuff too, so we're not hiring anybody to do that. So we would do that in-house, take down all the old lights and fixtures.
Yeah, we're gonna try and do what Jill had said, to take down the old fixtures, save some money that way, put it towards some other lights, or, you know, help the cost overall. And I should be able to do the low voltage wiring for it, which is the communication side of it, along with whoever we end up with, an electrical contractor that does the electrical side of it. So there's a certain amount of low voltage wire communication cable that has to be run to each lighting rail before it goes on from there that they take care of. So.
I was just going to say that I was impressed with the details that Gopher gave on what you provided us, everything. I don't understand all those lighting things, but it was very detailed.
Exactly what I was going to say, Mary Jo.
Well, you were impressed with that too?
I was impressed with, yeah, I didn't know what they were talking about.
Great.
Yeah.
That's why we.
There's a lot of information there, it's a lot of specs, and I spend my days reading a lot of that and learning, but it's still, you know, it's Greek until I dig into some of it further, but they had 37 pages compared to the one from Metro, so it was really impressive.
Detail, yeah.
The only other thing I read is that you were going to check the references, and you did do
Yes,
that?
we are going to, we have
Okay.
not yet, yep, we're going to do that as well. I don't anticipate any issues. I believe that we have worked with Gopher a couple times in the past, as they are an ETC, certified installation and repair company. ETC is the existing system that we have, and they're manufactured out of Middleton. So that's one of the other nice things about, well, that brings up another point between Gopher and Metro that I noticed, is that Metro did not have any control board or anything in that quote either, which can be tens of thousands of dollars more as well. Gopher had bid out an ETC system, which is kind of nice. That's made here in Wisconsin as well, and it's also the same brand that we've had, so it's kind of a nice company that way too.
It seems to me that we've been talking about the updating needs that we have for quite a while, and it seems to be a safety issue as well, that we need to have appropriate lighting that responds to works. So, and through the years, I was impressed. We haven't replaced carpet, we haven't done anything for the seating. I mean, our community has taken good care of that space. And I make a motion to accept the GSL quote. Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
All right, so it's open for discussion. The one question I have is how we would handle this. So are we, the quote would be for the, I think the number was 152,000.
152, 707.
So then how do we want to handle the additional 100,000 for electrician? Kent, are you standing up because you'd like to provide some insight on whole thing? Or?
So I've reached out to some contractors, one of them local. Both of them mentioned that you won't know what they're digging into, so it'd be more like a time and material job. So we could pay them an hourly rate for what they do for us. I think that would be our best option to go, because you don't know what the bids are going to come in at.
but we're gonna need to approve.
You would need to
Some
approve
funds.
some sort of funding for that, correct? And I could probably get some rough bids, but I don't think anyone will stick to a real hard bid when it comes to the project.
Will that electrician be able to do anything until we have all the materials here? Like, could the board approve the ordering of the materials, and then once school is out, your crew start taking down the other stuff, and then perhaps an electrician would be able to see better what we're asking of them, and they could do some bids then?
I'm sure we could do that, but they're gonna have to get kind of an idea of,
Yeah,
and like Justin said, a lot of it, they would do kind of the heavier work, and then Justin would be doing a lot of the low voltage ourselves, and we would in-house a lot of the project as well with our own maintenance crew.
So I'm willing to amend the motion for the 250,000 to get everything going. Is that kind of what we're discussing? Possibly?
I was saying that if we wanted to wait and approve the electrician bid when because right now the electrician doesn't have a clear picture of what we're asking them to do, and so perhaps if we had the new equipment here and they had taken down some of the current stuff, like we could get those pieces rolling and then have an electrician come in and give some bids for board approval. Would that work for your timeline, Kent?
Yep.
Okay.
Question, does this come out of the capital maintenance budget then?
So we have about $64,000 in ARPA funds that we would use first, that we received for any purpose. And then we could use capital maintenance trust funds, which is Fund 46, where we put money aside for things like that. Or we could use our fund balance for a one-time cost like this that we didn't really have an opportunity to plan forward for. So I wouldn't call it an emergency, but it starts to look like an emergency when you don't have lighting. So those would be kind of the sources. I'd like to see where a capital maintenance trust comes in at the end of the year before committing to that fully, because I don't want to so deplete that either. So
The fiscal year ended June for that, right?
correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry, to be there.
But I'm comfortable between the three sources, we'd be able to fund that. And then also look at some grant funds, like Justin had mentioned. You know, looking to the London Charitable Trust perhaps to help fund that project.
So which of those two funds are you recommending then, Jill?
Well, I think it'd be a combination actually of
Combination
all
of those
three,
two?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So then, the motion, as I understand it, is $152,000 and
707?
707, sorry, I need to write that number down, for the Gopher stage and lighting, and then the 64,000 from ARPA funds, was it 64 even?
64,210.
64,210, there it is. And then the balance to come from the other funds for a sum of 250,000. Is that?
No, she was not going to put the $100,000
Oh, not, oh,
in
we're not
for
taking
the
that,
electrician.
okay, right, just the
No,
one
just
52,
leaving it.
okay, thank you. Just trying to add two numbers. Okay, so the motion as it stands is the $152,000 number for Gopher stage and lighting.
Correct.
And
Mary Jo said.
Mary Jo seconded it. Further discussion?
I have one question. So like, for the electrical one, a lot of the high voltage, is it existing light or wiring be able to reuse? I mean, it's already there, kind
I
of.
think it'll be a combo of both. Like, it's there, so a lot of, like, the electrician's work would be done, but everything's gonna have to be dropped down to work with.
The complete removal of the existing rack that has all the electrical tied into it that communicated, it was a mixture of communication, electrical has to be removed.
Sure.
And then an entire new electrical panel has to be installed. So, yeah, depending on what we've got for wire lengths and things like that, some things may need to change. Ken and I were talking earlier, I think you kind of feel the same way I do. The upside is that we're going from something that took a lot more power to something that takes less, which is a lot easier to deal with than, the opposite. Yeah, so, I think we're sitting in a good position that way. It's a matter of if the wires reach everywhere that they need to and things from that.
There's probably not gonna be a lot of energy savings because it's not like it's used 24/7 or nothing either.
Well,
It's got some seasons where it's heavily used, right? Not on a daily basis, but there are some times of year when it's pretty busy, so.
yeah, and we're talking a few 100,000 watts easily each time it's in use. And sometimes we could have it going 8 to 12 hours in a row. Sometimes a week at a time. So while it's not used every day, day in, day out, the whole lighting system is not used day in, day out. At those peak times, it's a tremendous savings.
I guess I have one more question too, Justin. Does that include any kind of a service contract later on, or is it like warranty type of?
Most of the lights that I looked at, according to the specs, were 5 years and 10 years on a lot of them. And I can dig a lot further into that with Dave and go from there. The biggest thing we were hoping to do is, get a kind of a closed ballpark bid and get the ball rolling as soon as possible, so that we have a system for next year.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I definitely plan on getting much further in depth with him, even with certain lightings and changes and different things like that we should have, so. Well, one thing I will say too, by the way, along the same lines, the nice thing with this type of lighting, and of course this system that we have now is quite changeable as well. I've changed several of the fixtures and parts and pieces itself, but with these fixtures, if we have an issue and it's outside of warranty, granted, it all depends on who's here. If I'm not here 10 years from now or something like that, when things are out of warranty, but these fixtures are a lot easier to take in and out of service and deal with. Most of the life expectancy of the LEDs is 50,000, 55,000 hours. So that was kind of the, given life expectancy, like I said, 5-10 years or so.
And this is relatively future-proofed, I'm assuming, going to low voltage controls and all that. It's about. I know you can't promise that.
Yeah, and I deal with that every day with what I work with. So I always say it's about as future-proof as you can get. It's as future-proof as we have available to us at this time. I don't think there's any other emerging technology anywhere that's any better than this. So yeah, because I obviously have the same concern. We may have 31 years pretty much on the old system, so you want to have something that's going to last a while. So. Yeah.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All right. So the motion again for the $152,000 for Badger stage and lighting, Gopher stage and lighting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Kent, go coach that team now.
Yep. Go coach the victory.
Thanks, Justin.
Thanks,
Yeah, you guys have a nice night. You guys have a nice evening too.
Next up, we're going to jump to 6.1, our focus on purpose. We have the English language arts update.
Good evening. Oh, you do have it ready to go up there. It's my first time in front of the school board. It's not as intimidating as I thought. Thank you for this opportunity for us to share with you some of the great things we've been doing at the high school at our PLC department, or at our English department. You've seen this already, but if I can point out a few highlights, I feel like over the last 2 years we have come a very long way in our PLC. In that we are a lot more streamlined, we are a lot more aligned with each other. Especially with all the transition to standards-based grading, we spend a great deal of time reevaluating what it is we're teaching in our classes, focusing with a laser-like purpose on the outcomes in the Wisconsin standards, spending a great deal of time organizing our grading levels, and spending a lot of time reflecting on what success looks like for each of those levels. I hope you've had an opportunity to click on some of those links to our to some of our flagship classes. We don't have all of them listed there, but I am proud to say that about 95% of all our courses have been rolled over into the new format going forward. Like I said, these are just the flagship classes that we listed. These are the classes that all students have to take at one point or the other. But all of our other elective courses are also in line with having success criteria, with having our levels of mastery set and our outcomes. Most of our time going forward is going to be spent editing, fine-tuning the lessons, the assignments, the assessments, how we're assessing. That's where a lot of our conversations are taking place now. We're discussing, can we find a better way to assess one of the outcomes? Is there a better text we can match with another of our outcomes? So it's a lot of editing, fine-tuning, but I feel like the bones of what we got going on are solid and are growing. You want to hit the next slide there, or whoever's running it there? There we go.
Can I pause for a second and ask you guys to all introduce yourselves?
Oh my
and I'm
goodness.
sure all the board members or community know who you guys all are. So if you would start.
My name is Troy Teedens. I've been here about 4 years. I've been teaching about 18 altogether. We have Julie Teedens, who's been.
She rolls her eyes at her husband.
Mine's on yours, yes.
This is our new hire, Mandy Bartels, and she's been a wonderful addition to our department. Missing tonight is Haley Osborne, and Laura Zilmer we've kind of brought into our PLC at the high school as part of the literacy initiative that we've been taking on. So
Excellent, thank you. I just know that it's nice for them to put faces with names when they have the opportunity, so.
I'm sorry, I just kind of ran off on there. Some of our priorities, as I mentioned, we are working on refinement of those guaranteed standards and curriculum. Some things that are on our to-do list is the addition of what we are calling an English prep course. This is designed for incoming 8th graders to get some extra support before they get put into the regular flagship English 9 class. Some of the things that we've taken upon ourselves, our own initiative, to address some of the struggling reading scores in our own in the whole district, is the inclusion of some direct vocabulary instruction that we really haven't had before. This is sort of a hodgepodge, pick here and there, but basically the thrust of it comes from something called Word Within a Word. It's a curriculum that's been used in a lot of different schools all over the place, and it focuses on Greek and Latin word recognition. Another thing that we're trying is to improve reading fluency through timed readings. I started this, I've been doing this myself for many years, but just getting my juniors ready for the ACT, I would have them do practice timed readings. We're kind of expanding that downward into sophomore and freshman years to help them improve their reading instruction. And Laura's really focusing on the phonics instruction with her program there. So this is all stuff that we're doing to try to address some of the reading issues that we've been seeing throughout. And again, as I said, streamlining our procedures. Highlighting our current work, I think. Julie is up next. What's coming up here?
Slides. Okay, so just a couple things that happened this year that I thought you guys might like to see. That top photo is actually of Kaylee Sweeney, who is a senior this year. She interviewed social studies teacher Eli Youngthunder for a piece that ended up going out to all of the digital media for PBS NewsHour Student Reporting Labs. And it was in November, of course, to kind of highlight Native American Heritage Month. Talked about like his connection to teaching First Nations history. Also as part of that, we had Zach Schultz, who is a reporter for PBS Wisconsin. He works on the public affairs show Here and Now and various other programs. But he came in, and the bottom pictures are of a day that he talked with them about how to use the cameras and how to interview. His big thing is interviewing. And so he talked to them about how to really have a good conversation with people and get information from them. And I think, by the way, that is a huge thing that doesn't just apply to journalists, right? But if you can have a good discussion and conversation with someone, that is going to take you so far. So we teach them those kinds of skills. And they were also brainstorming some story ideas for them. It's part of it's called the Otto Bremer grant that PBS Wisconsin got. But it's all about reporting on rural Wisconsin stories. And so our kids were helping the reporters find good sources here around Black River and, do some brainstorming and things. So that was really amazing. Could you get the next slide? This is the amazing one. So
this is super crazy. It's never happened before, but because we're connected with PBS Wisconsin, and we were close, the Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, happened to have a bus tour in September, and they contacted PBS Wisconsin, and PBS Wisconsin said, well, hey, we've got Julie's lab up there, and so my kids went up there, and they hadn't actually interviewed anyone before, but they interviewed the Secretary of Education, like U.S. Secretary of Education, which I thought was cool. Kaylee did it. Kaylee Young Thunder is off to, in the bottom picture. She's off to the left there. Mela Ingebrigtsen is off to the right. Those guys did a lot of filming, shooting B-roll and things. It was amazing. Last one that I have, sorry I'm going on for so long, but this is awesome too. That kid right there who's on the right, who's smiling so big, he's one of our yearbook students. And his name is Gabe Iverson. He is a wonderful kid, but he didn't love me his sophomore year, but he ended up taking yearbook and was about to quit the class after the first day. But then we had this elective and he's like, I think I'll stay. And he loves photography. And I didn't know that. I don't think anybody did. And so he would just take our cameras and practice with them. And he ended up buying some of his own gear and everything. But he took a photo that he sent off to Walsworth, which is our our yearbook company. And he ended up winning, getting a spot in there, what's called the Possibilities book. It's a lookbook. It basically is examples of all the best work that's out there in high school yearbook. His photo got those 2 pages right there. That's his stuff. It's a 2-page spread of one of his photos, which is amazing. And that was him seeing it for the first time, being super excited. So that's one of the things I just loved about this job. Seeing the kids smile like that. But that's what happened.
Before you go on, I would love to just point out, so you've seen that top one where it says PBS Wisconsin Education, and then it says led by Julie Tiedens. So 2 weeks ago, we had some of the leaders from PBS Wisconsin were up in Black River Falls, and they were talking with Julie in our classes, and we got to give them a tour of the new spaces because they're getting a new recording studio, all that really cool stuff next year. And it was really interesting because I know that Julie's a celebrity. Mr. Madsen had not experienced that, and the kids certainly didn't know that, but the people that were there from PBS, they said, do you know how lucky you are to learn from the Julie Tiedens every day? They went on and on and on about the amazing opportunities that our kids get because Julie followed her passion in this recording area. And so our kids get this exposure that you see down in that bottom, that how many high schools in the nation? 100 and...
Right now it's about 150, and there's basically 2 or 3 in Wisconsin.
So 150 high schools in the nation get these opportunities, 2 or 3 in the state of Wisconsin. And so before we just slide on by, this I think is an example of, this is an area of interest for Julie. And so she was able to dive even deeper, and now our kids get these amazing opportunities because of following that interest. So, yeah.
Next slide. Well, that's kind of hard to follow up.
I'm sorry.
So I primarily teach freshman English, and just recently we wrapped up a huge poster project that they did with some groups, and we focused on a text called Antigone. It's a Greek play. She's got some kick to her.
Yeah.
She's an interesting gal. And one of the things we kind of focused on was a theme of civil disobedience, and students were paired in their pod groups, and their task was to research and create a poster highlighting some of the things people throughout history have done that have famously displayed civil disobedience. So we had people pick Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, some other not as well known names like Marsha P. Johnson or Madonna Thunderhawk. So there's a few pictures of the students working on their posters in class. Not as cool as Julie's stuff. So
Julie's been here a few years. That was very well done.
I don't know if the next slide will show up. That was Miss Osborne's slide. She had done a video project with The Great Gatsby, and she's not here to talk about it, so I didn't feel right. We don't have anything presented. That is pretty much it. I feel that we're in a really good position as an English department at high school, that we are poised to become greater, and moving forward, I'm super positive about the things we've done and will do. Do you have any questions for me?
I just have one related to standards-based grading. Is the whole entire English department using standards-based grading right now?
Yes, we are. That's it. I kind of was thick-headed and stubborn enough to say, we want to lead the charge. We want to be the best. We want to set the standard in the high school. and we've risen to that challenge, I feel like. There's been some bumps along the way. Of course. I think we're doing good things.
Any other questions for them?
Thank
you so very much for your time.
Next is 7.2, which is the school social worker and DDP report.
Hello, I am Vicki Mikulski. I'm the school social worker for the district. I think this is year number 6 for me, so we'll just jump right in. I use the same PowerPoint every year and just update it. So the first one is things that I do in district, involved in the trauma-sensitive schools team, the culturally responsive teaching team, our CAST team meetings, which is where the counselors, admin, social worker, and other support people meet at each building every week or every other week. And then all of these exciting handbook, insurance, and calendar committee meetings. Outside of school, I meet with Jackson County at-risk social workers. So that's for kids that we have filed truancy on or who have delinquency orders. I do participate with Together for Jackson County Kids, part of the servant-led homelessness subcommittee that started at the beginning of this year, trying to find community solutions for our homelessness population. We did start meeting again with Ho-Chunk prevention social workers, trying to build up that relationship again and help the kids the best we can. And then also Jackson County CST team.
Tell them what CST is, please.
Coordinated Services Team. So a wraparound service for people to get services from around the community.
And so other players on that team, I'm seeing some perplexed looks yet. Other players would be?
Whatever the student needs. So it's led by Jackson County social workers, social services. And so if they need a mentor, then we pull in someone who has a mentor. If they need Lunda Center membership for something, then we'll pull them in too. So whatever the student needs to
Thank you.
thrive. It was a little bit busy for me this year in the grants department, which is really exciting. So every year I do apply for the Good Neighbor Grant. We get $25 Goodwill gift cards to give out to families in need. I do have a few yet to give away this year, so if you know someone who needs summer clothes, let me know. Almost every year I get about like $300 for school supplies for families in need from our Tiger Investment Club. I applied for and received the homeless compliance grant through DPI, which was initially $15,000, which I was super excited about that. But because I had applied for the grant, we were eligible for additional funding because of ARPA funds, and they doubled that to $30,000 for the next 3 years. So I got to do that this year. I also applied for the best screener for Forest Street to do next year. Don't ask me what it stands for, but we did attempt to do this a couple years ago. It wasn't done quite to fidelity, so we wanted to try it out again on a smaller scale. It's a universal screener we're gonna do it on kindergarten and first graders to evaluate social, emotional, behavioral health. And it'll give us kind of a range of students who are struggling externally, which we probably already can identify, but also those who have more internalizing behavior. And we can use this data to help us pick which interventions would be most appropriate for these students. Finally, we received a $1,500 EEF grant for sensory room stuff at Gebhardt School. So homelessness is a big part of my job. I always include the definition up here because it's not simply people who don't have a house. A lot of our families are considered doubled up with another family, so they just don't have their own house to go to. They could be temporarily living in a hotel or a shelter. Some of them are in their cars or campground or don't have a place to go at all, as well as minor students who meet the above criteria, but don't have a parent with them, parent or guardian. So this year, I believe this is still up to date. I've identified 28 different families and 57 kids. With the compliance grant this year, those 57 kids are not all school-age kids. I am required to track all of the kids, so younger siblings and those in Head Start. So I did start adding those onto my tracking sheet. But of the kids that are school-age, it came out to be about 3.1% of our student population. And I just put in the previous year's percentages on there so you kind of get a rough estimate on where we are, right about where we usually are every year. So of those 28 families, 5 of them found permanent housing this year, 7 of them moved, 15 are still experiencing homelessness. 3 of those families are attending Black River from outside of our district, so they were here and found housing other places or ended up moving other places, and so we're helping them with transportation to get to Black River. I have 5 unaccompanied homeless youth throughout the year, and one of those graduated early. I just like to include the graph because I am a visual person. So these are our living arrangements of our homeless families this year. Like I said, most of our families are doubled up. We had a couple in the shelter, a few unsheltered families, and then one in the motel as well.
Where are the unsheltered living? I mean, what kind of?
So those were at a campground.
Okay.
Throughout the winter, it would be considered in the unsheltered category. That's what those were this year. In the past, they've been in vehicles. So diving more into the homelessness with the grant that I had this year, we created the homeless policy, which I believe is on the docket for today. So hopefully that will be done soon. And then, like I said before, I am a participant on the homeless subcommittee for the servant-led group, which is comprised of 37 members from all across Wisconsin. Our primary goals are to develop an after-hours plan. So when someone is homeless, where do they go? How do they access help when it's not Monday through Friday, 8 to 4? Right now, the process is to go to the sheriff's department, which is a barrier for some of our people because they're afraid to go in case they have warrants or some other record. They don't want to go to the sheriff's office for help. We are trying to increase our county's access to the coordinated entry list, which in a nutshell is access to Section 8 housing and to get on the list for low-income housing in our county. We know that we don't have access to affordable housing in Jackson County, and transportation is an issue too for these individuals. And then just educating the community that there is a homelessness issue here and we need help and who can do what to help solve the problem. And then I also did some brief staff knowledge checks throughout the school year just to see where our school staff was and their knowledge of McKinney-Vento. So just some cool things. These are things that I created for the grant. Brochures, which I actually have here that anybody who wants to take them can. If you know somebody who is experiencing homelessness, pass it on to them. We want everybody to know what their rights are for attending school. I did create a needs assessment to give to our families. It's not required for them to fill it out, but it helps guide me where they need help the most. I have a sample of that too for you guys to take a look at. It's double-sided. And then finally, the website. We didn't have a specific page on the website before this, so pre-hack, I was able to get it up. It's not, I don't think I can finish it yet. I don't have access to that yet. But most of it is up there and accurate, and I have a lot of stuff up there that I didn't have before. So I did have my review from DPI at the end of the year. So they said that they really liked the brochure and the needs assessment, the tracking sheet that I have to make sure that I'm doing everything that I need to do for these families, and the dispute process that I copied from another district's policy.
And so just to summarize, part of the reason that the grant dollars are used to inform people of what McKinney-Vento is and what the true definition, the school definition of homeless is so that people ask for resources, right? That there are resources in place, but people don't recognize, I have a roof over my head, I'm not homeless. And so that's a lot of the staff education that you've been doing that doubled up in all of those different varieties, so that staff know to advocate for kids and families as well, so.
So next year for the grant, because it's a multi-year grant, we're going to focus really heavily on the education for community, parents, and staff on McKinney-Vento. That's what MV is. And then to allocate the grant dollars, because I made brochures, and so I need to spend $30,000 apparently on something. So hopefully the needs assessment will help me direct where our greatest need and help these families. Another part of what I do is the Deferred Expulsion program. Since 2012, when the program started, we have 97 DEPs, which is not up to date, unfortunately, but it was last week. Just an example of how our DEPs have landed over the years. A pretty typical year, I would say, this year, 12 of them. This graph is very telling to me. I think we need to really focus hard on our middle school, 6th graders and maybe even 5th graders, because those 7th graders seem to have the most troubles with AODA infractions at school. And then
Just for clarification, I'm not sure everyone knows, we have new board members. Would you explain when we initiated DEP?
So DEP is offered to students who have a first-time drug or alcohol infraction on school grounds. So they either are bringing substances, THC vapes is a new thing. Dealing is an automatic expulsion, so that's not included. I haven't had those in my house.
And so the policy actually says that we may offer a deferred expulsion. So that would, the caveat there is if there's a student that's already got 60 other behavior infractions that year, and then there's an AODA one, that administrator can make the decision whether they want to offer a deferred expulsion, because it's kind of a compounding problem with the other behaviors, versus a student that has virtually, he has had a pretty positive year without any other behaviors, and then makes a poor choice one day. We offer the deferred expulsion as opposed to immediately jumping to expulsion with those students.
So I try to categorize these the best I can. Most of the time our students just have paraphernalia on school grounds, like the vape pens. We find those all the time. If they're caught using the vape pens, then that would be consumption. Those are our main two offenses. And then I like to also dive down and see what are our students struggling with. So this year I added that THC vape on there. That wasn't on there before. I just lumped it in with the marijuana, and I felt like those were two different things. And so it's kind of telling how much the vape is catching up to the marijuana one. Our program is mostly successful. We've had 52 successful completions. 21, 22, 23, 24 had been expelled after either violating the agreement or a second offense after they've already completed their DEP. Then I have 11, now hopefully 12 in progress. And then I gave a presentation to the bus drivers today, and they were looking at me like that, and I was looking at them like that. Does anybody have any questions?
One thing that you did miss that I think is so important is the clothing center that you created within our space too for.
Yes. Yeah, I do take donations from the community throughout the year for kids to come and check out clothing. Winter gear was a big thing this year with coats and snow pants and hats and mittens, boots. Had a nice grant this year, so I'm stocked up a little bit more for next year.
You do a lot of great things.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for communicating. I appreciate it.
I'll give you guys this.
So next we have 5.3, but as I understand it, all the comments are relating to the gender support plan, is that correct?
Yes, then we have two that talk about counselor meetings, which is not on the agenda.
He's going to pay some grants, which is okay with you after public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Nope, that's quite right.
So I guess the two that want to speak, I have to find my, where's gender support? Lost there. 7.3, there it is. The two that want to speak regarding 7.3, the gender support plan, I don't know who it is. Would you be interested in speaking when we get closer to that agenda item?
So she was not on the committee, but it doesn't matter to me.
Well, I do have to stop my son's game to practice tonight.
Okay, then let's
Okay.
So let's go ahead with public comment. 5.3.
Do you have the order?
I have the order. The first person is Susan Markart. She was going to speak about counseling meetings.
We both have pretty much the same thing. This is my sister Kathy Jerstead. My son's in first grade. I just recently found out last night, where is it written that our children, it's mandatory that our children have to see a counselor in school? My child is being pulled out of his class and is seeing Denise Rumley, I think her name is. I want to know why. Why wasn't I told that he's seeing her? What are they talking about? And basically, what the hell is going on? Because I don't feel this is right. Her son is being pulled in and being talked to. Is it because we're a family? Is it a family thing here that our children are being pulled in and sort of, separated from everybody else and being questioned? Or are there other parents' children who are being pulled in and talked to also? Do they know? Why weren't we informed that our children are being talked to by the counselor? No one told me. My son, in the last week and a half, I've had so many issues. I mean, we started we moved here from Minnesota. My son, I was homeschooling him until the mask thing was over and done with, and we just recently, here about 2 months ago, started him here in school because he has an issue with the mask. He couldn't wear it because of different issues that he has. Okay, now about the last 2 weeks, we've been having issues with my son that we have never had before with him. He has been coming home swearing, using words that we do. I'm sorry, I swear, I'm a truck driver. I used to be a truck driver. I swear, but the words that he's using are words that I do not use and I do not allow in my house. All of a sudden, he's coming home from school saying these things. Where is he getting this from? He comes to me, he goes, "Mama." I said, "What?" He goes, My teacher asked me if I want to be a boy." And I'm like, "Excuse me?" She goes, she asked if I like being a boy. And I'm like, "What did you tell her?" "Yeah." Where's this coming from? Why was I told my son is being pulled in to talk to the school counselor? Why am I being informed what they're talking about? I have that right as a parent. Which that does have to do with the gender thing, but I guess our main concern was the counseling of why, if there's a reason why they meet with the counselor. I mean, I guess I can see junior in high school, but I have a 4K kid, and I guess I'm just kind of concerned because he told me, he's like, "Well, I just go in a room and I play games with her," and he's too young to tell me. I ask him what he does, and he's like, "I don't remember, I just play games," because he's in 4K. So I mean, I guess that's just my main concern, what do they talk about and how come they don't let us know
I mean, I understand if it's a parent, that they're worried about parents, but like my teachers say that my kid is very good in school, he has no behavior problems, he has no, so I guess my main concern is why does he need to see a guidance counselor, I guess?
Is this every child that's getting pulled into the guidance office and being talked to? Or is it just ours?
And I'm happy to respond, I just wanna make sure you have your time to give your comments, so I
No,
don't wanna.
I guess I would like some answers as to what's
So-
going on.
So I'm sorry, I'm unaware of your child, and I would ask Mrs. Floyd to help me out here, but Kathy, I was actually made aware of your concern, and so I did some scouting with Melanie and Mrs. Floyd, pardon me, the principal over there. The kids leave their classroom, and our school counselor has a separate classroom, and my understanding is that your child has never been pulled by themselves. Their whole 4K classroom goes into the counselor's room.
So I didn't know
and
that,
they do their,
he's
right.
young, so obviously.
Right,
he
absolutely.
just says we go in there and play a game, I didn't know if it was like.
Absolutely, nope, the
Being
whole,
segregated or like what's going on, 'cause I'm like, he's only, 4K, I'm like, that's kind of
Absolutely.
scary for me to like think he's in there.
absolutely. And so guidance happens once every 6-day rotation for all kids K through 5, and then middle school, Mr. Norton will have to help me with what grade levels we teach. Just 6th grade happens regularly. So 4K through 5, there's a guidance lesson once every 6-day rotation. And so in talking to Mrs. Floyd, she went and talked to Denise, and your son has never been pulled individually, it's always been in group. And so I'm unaware of your child, and Mrs. Floyd, I'm positive we'll do some scouting and we'll get back to you on that. Just so everyone is clear what our practice is that if a child sees a counselor one time, and 4K is really different, right? Because they're not usually going there with a problem, if they have a problem, they, throw something or cry or whatever, right? It's not quite the same. But as kids get older, if they go talk to a counselor one time, that just happens, and they talk to that counselor one time. If that student asks to see the counselor again, any kind of regularity, the counselor always calls the parent and notifies them. That is consistent throughout our system. At the committee meeting the other night, our middle school counselor, somebody asked her that specific question, and she said, if a kid comes to talk to me one time, we have the conversation and we move on. If the child asks to see me again or invites more of a conversation, they reach out to the parent and let them know that's happening. I'm sorry, I don't know the details for your child, but Mrs. Floyd, are you familiar? And you can, so if you wouldn't mind, could you tell me your name one more time?
Grace, I'm Susan Marquardt.
Susan.
My son is Grayson, he's in 1st grade, Mr. Mixed Room.
Perfect.
He does have an IEP, so I thought, well, maybe that has something to do with it. But we just had an IEP meeting for him because he, like I said, he just recently started here.
Sure.
And there was no the counselor's name was not in there on the meeting, so her name wasn't anywhere on the paperwork. So it's kind of like, what's going on here and why?
Yep, and I don't know that. It could be that he's going with his, he definitely would have guidance with his class as well.
Okay.
Definitely would have that every 6-day rotation. Mrs. Floyd now has your contact information. How about she gives you a call tomorrow after she has a chance to do a little scouting?
All right, I'd appreciate that.
Perfect, you bet. Thank you very much.
So do they just kind of like monitor the kids? What exactly do they?
So we have it's on our website, if you go to our curriculum, there's a K-12 guidance curriculum. And so it is how to be a friend, how to, I'm trying to think of some of the other things. Help me out, folks.
Right now, they're talking about being bucket fillers, so it is all about being
Okay,
good
he was
friends.
talking about, Grayson was trying to explain that, and he goes, it's an imaginary bucket, Mom. And I'm like,
that sounds like the group guidance lesson that he would have done with the rest of his class. And so it really is, another example would be like if 2nd grade was having a hard time out at recess, there was lots of battles over the tire swing, then they would talk to the counselor, and for the next couple of weeks of guidance, they would talk about how do we share, what strategies can we use to make sure everyone gets a chance, right? So there is a curriculum that is posted. There's a state guidance curriculum. Some of those materials are available online. Looking to Dr. Sullivan, I'm not sure how many, but the curriculum is definitely available. It is 4K through 5, once every 6-day rotation, and so that would be large group. I'm unaware if your child is being pulled individually. Kathy, I just had heard about your specific concerns, so I did some scouting this afternoon.
Right.
So.
Yeah, he's just so young, he can't really tell me. Like,
Right.
when I tell him some people, like, I don't remember. So, like, you made it sound like it was him alone. And
yeah. So ask him, are your friends there with you when you go see him? Ask him, are your friends there with you?
He's like, he'll be like, I don't remember. He'll just like, I think he's afraid he's getting in trouble, so I try not to ask too many questions. But Like, and when he was telling me that, I'm like, okay, so then when I talked to his teacher's like, no, he's doing perfect, so I'm like, okay, like, I'm confused then.
Sure, absolutely.
So, okay.
So they use like puppets to talk about stories. They will sometimes do a read aloud and then do different characters and stuff like that. So it is all meant to be self-efficacy. It's how do we get along with others? How do we, all of those kinds of things.
Okay, good. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next up, we have Carrie Swigum, who would like to talk about the gender support plan, and after her would be Barb Sullivan.
Page 2. I attended that ad hoc meeting the other night concerning the gender support plan. I came out of there with several issues about that meeting that concerned me. Number one, that survey that was given at the beginning, when was that given to the kids and when were the parents notified that this was going to be given?
Sure, so the youth risk, I'm sorry if you want me to answer.
No, go ahead.
The youth risk behavior survey is something that's given in the state. That specific details we saw were from 2019. It's given through grades 6 through 11 on an annual basis. It didn't happen during COVID, so 19 is the most recent data we have.
So that's not even recent data as far as...
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And why now is there help being offered to a select few students, not all students? We're looking for a gender support plan. A lot of kids had major depression and anxiety through the mask wearing, but no help was offered for that depression. Gender dysphoria is a depression mental health issue. No doubt about that. With 80% of the people that are identifying as a gender different than when they were born, they're returning to their original gender as adult. I'm questioning, is this the best way to use taxpayer money? By making these gender plans, I guess I will say. It was also stated at the ad hoc meeting that meetings with children behind the backs of parents is not done in the Black River Falls School District. I have firsthand knowledge of this happening, not only to other kids, but to my son. I believe Mr. Madsen had a meeting with him, and Mr. Shepherd.
They're not counselors, just to be real clear.
Right. That wasn't about the ad hoc.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, that was, I'm going more for transparency there, that why are parents not informed about this? I was informed by my son that he got hauled in to a meeting, what it was about. And it's been on more than one occasion. And that's when I was gonna say, where's the transparency? How does the superintendent, board, and Black River Falls administration all say we're partners in education? You're clearly not looking to partner in education with any parent that does not agree with your agenda for extracurricular education. Stick to the truth, the whole truth, the biological truth. Stick with the basics of education in which the teachers earn their degrees. Leave the rest of the education to the parents. Teach the children how to think, not what to think. As far as the new standards-based education, this is just bigotry of low expectations. That's all it is. You lower the expectations of our students, you're only hurting them in their education. Our community, only to pat yourselves on the back for the optics of portraying success. The students know it, the parents know it, but nothing, it's celebrated, and it should not be celebrated.
Next up is Barb Sullivan, and she's followed by Faith Hansen.
Hi, Barb Sullivan, and I'm a taxpayer. And I also was at that meeting. Could really see how it was split. The way people were thinking and how we see things so differently. But this gender support plan, it's too huge for, I believe, the administration to implement it. This plan asks for gender identity, and on the same line, it asks for sex at birth. So it's a lie, you know, that they're putting on this form. It's an oxymoron. The plan asks how public or private will information about students' gender be? If a degree of privacy, what are the strategies? The plan asks how do they want other students, staff members, parents, community to respond to any questions about the student's gender. The plan, if approved by the parent, would allow the student to change their legal name to a preferred name in the student's records. That's a huge and unprofessional educational for an education facility to change the name that you were given, your legal name. The plan also asks about bathrooms, locker rooms, class trips. The extracurricular activities will they be active in? And there's more. It's a 6-page document. The plan is so detailed and specific that I'm calling the board to send it to the policy committee and then bring it to the board as an amendment to the ones that we already have, that already exist for students, conduct, behavior, and safety. I want the board to take the responsibility for this huge, huge gender issue. And we already have student non-discrimination 411 policy. We have another non-discrimination policy 441.2, and then we have a classroom behavior 443, and then 832 we have public conduct. So we already are talking about safety for a lot of the students, and I don't know why they have to separate the gender one. There's the door has been opened for the gender. The door's been opened, and now this right here is only opening it wider. And all of you who know about history know that the gender, this is all going to destroy humanity. It has in the past in history. So I want the board to take care of this. Put it in a policy or take it to a committee and then I want the board responsible for this, not the administration, the board. Because you are for us. Okay, thank you.
Next up is Faith Hansen for the gender support. And she'll be the last person in public comment.
Hello, I am Faith Hansen. I have 2 children in our school district. I have Owen and Bear. Her teachers call her Bear. Her coaches call her Bear. Her name is Bear. The only time her government name of Kaylin is used is when she's in trouble, and it's usually by me. The changing of the names is not legal. It was stated in the meeting. You don't have to legally change the name. It is giving the child the name that they prefer, that they feel comfortable with. And this is not going against their parents. Their parents are involved in this every step of the way. I talked to the counselor because I was like, so the child comes to the counselor, says, this is how I identify, and then the counselor's like, well, I gotta call your parents right away. No, they talk about it. They work it out. And the parents do put their children into, it's a whole thing. But in our school district, they are taking the first step in opening doors. Opening those doors that were open for women's rights. Opening those doors that were open for African American rights, and opening those doors for our LGBTQ community. I applaud our board for doing this. I hear that biology says a lot about gender. Trans people believe they were born in the wrong body, but biology says this. Well, religion believes Jesus was a person, no matter what science says. So the argument is invalid. I applaud our district. I worked in a high school 5 years ago and I had 2 trans kids that didn't have that safety. They didn't have that safety put in place. I wish they could be here now. I wish they could redo the high school experience with the plan. It's not, it doesn't affect everybody. It doesn't affect everybody. And the thing that I heard most about was the bathrooms and the locker rooms. And it was always boys sneaking into girls. It was never girls sneaking into boys. And as a mother of a 15-year-old girl, she would sneak into the boys. There's 11 students in our school district right now. 11. That's it. It's not affecting the rest of the school. It's the 11 kids. Why don't they matter? Thank you.
And that concludes public comment then.
That completes public comment.
Thank you. All right, next we have 5.4, review and revise our core agenda. So one of the things that we have to do as part of this is we have the additional meetings. So we are meeting on the even months, an additional Monday, right? We're saying the first and third Mondays of the month. So we have to, one of the things I want to make sure that we get done is I want to be purposeful with our time. So in June, the existing meeting is the policy subcommittee, which happens on June, check my calendar, 6th is a Monday. And so then we do not have an additional meeting in July. We have just the normal standing meeting. And then in August, we have 2 meetings. So we have our core agenda here if we want to make any changes to that. And then I want to identify agenda items. I would like to at least start talking about August if we don't determine what August will be this month. And then going forward, I want to make sure we have plenty of time so that administration can prepare any information that we want for that additional meeting.
And so the purpose of the core agenda is that, like, it'll be February and somebody says, I haven't heard anything about, wait, you name it, whatever it may be. Haven't heard anything about the behavior policy at Forestry, right? This core agenda is meant to be those items that you as a collective group want to know about. And so we put them on a calendar year so that we make sure that that information comes to you on an annual basis. So parking them into the right months is part of it, but also making sure every piece of the district's work that matters a lot to you is also reflected in here somewhere. So if there's topics that you don't see reflected that you know you would like updates on, they certainly can be added as well.
So are the topics that are listed there, we can pull some of those out for those extra meetings?
Absolutely.
And I would think that the data dashboards definitely would be pulled out. I would like them pulled out for one of those extra meetings. But you're saying, Nick, or Brad, we don't need one on June?
Well, we have, so of those even meetings, some of them are already the policy subcommittee.
That's not how I understood our last conversation,
still
but
an additional one, okay.
It's an additional meeting.
My understanding was that we were looking, and please help me, collective memory here of the group. I thought that we were going to schedule the 6 additional meetings throughout the year, and it was student success, community engagement, finance and facilities kind of stuff. And that policy would stay pulled out because that one was a more defined committee meeting, was my recollection, so.
I noted that wrong then. So then we would have, there will be a policy subcommittee on Monday, June 6th at 4 p.m. And then we'll have a full board meeting then at 6 p.m. Is that we're sticking with that time.
And will we have data to do then?
We'll have the end of year iReady data. We won't have the Wisconsin Forward tests or ACT tests, any of that stuff, but we would have annual growth for the year that we could dive into and do some of that disaggregation that we haven't really taken the time to do with the large group. We will also, if I hurry, have stakeholder feedback data that we didn't take time for in our regular meeting, but could certainly take some time to go through that as well.
Well, in our, our board, it said that we are going to do a board self-evaluation twice a year, so I don't know if that would be a good. I went through the even months and put stuff down that I thought we could do. I don't know if anybody else did that or not. Maybe did anybody else do that?
Shelley, can I ask clarification? The regular meeting was moved to June 13th?
Yeah.
And then budget was gonna be June 27th as well.
Oh, I forgot that.
So I
Okay.
didn't know if you wanted to put more stuff on June 27th.
Sure. So if you recall, we moved our June, whatever it was supposed to be, to June 13th. And then we also need to have one June 27th because the budget pieces wouldn't be done that early. And so we could, our first time around, whatever we were going to do on the night of June 6th, that could be on June 27th because that is an extra meeting already there and the budget piece won't take that much time. Thank you for that reminder, Joan.
I just didn't want you to have
3 meetings. That was
Unless you
April.
wanted to.
That was April, wasn't it?
Unless you wanted to.
Okay.
So with everyone's permission, we could do our regular monthly meeting on June 13th. And then on the 27th, I heard data dashboard and perception survey feedback.
I think that's fine, yeah. I agree with that. Just 2 meetings and you use them officially.
And the budget.
Yeah.
And board self-eval is actually a board policy that we have been not in compliance with for a while. So we should probably have some conversation about what kind of tool you would like to use and how.
So shall we repeat that for the 27th items?
I have the data dashboard.
Yep.
I have the perception survey data. I have the budget. And board self-evaluation is what I have down.
Okay, thank you.
That's a full meeting.
It's okay.
And are we going to count those as special board meetings? The reason that I'm asking is because I usually don't have the full admin team here for special board meetings, and I usually don't ask Ben to flex his day to be here that night. Are you guys,
Yeah, I think that's fine.
you're okay with that? Okay, thank you.
And then one item that we don't need to cover in June, but I would like to cover before school starts again came up in our last expulsion hearing is a discussion of norms and expectations based on some of the conversations we had.
Honestly, the July meeting is usually quite brief, and I'm okay with that in July. I think most people are, but we could do that at our July board meeting because there's really not usually a lot that happens at that meeting.
My only resistance to that is I will likely not be
Okay.
here in July.
Okay.
I would just like to do it before
Yep.
school starts in the fall.
Gotcha.
Well, we always have an extra meeting, we almost always have an extra meeting in August where we do our facility tour.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be could be one of the items.
And
that August.
I don't think it's gonna take that long. I just think we need to calibrate.
Sounds good. Sounds good. And so I've made those notes, added expulsion review to August, and this actually does get formally updated each year. So if there's no other suggestions, would be looking for action.
I make a motion to approve the core agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, motion second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Right. 5.5, we have board committees and board norms discussion. We can choose to, I believe we tabled that last meeting. We can choose to lift that from the table, or that would be another summer meeting item as well, if we wanted to work on that. Thoughts?
We had that list of board norms that was in our packet.
5.5, Jill, there it is.
I thought it was good.
I felt like there was a lot of good discussion, and then everyone got tired, and we said, let's come take a fresh look at it another day.
Yeah, did anybody have a chance to look at those and say, hey, don't agree with that, or we should change a word or something?
I looked at it and I thought, yay.
I thought it was quite clear, and I wasn't present, so I appreciate the work that's done.
So what do we have to do with this? Decide if we need more work on it, or just approve it the way it is, or?
I didn't have it as action
No, it's not.
needed because I was uncertain, but if you're ready for it to be, I certainly can next time, and it's not policy, right? It's just internal commitments, so you tell me where you would like it to live.
So could this be under the ethics? I mean, that's a board policy,
It
correct?
certainly could. So there's policy that goes through the whole procedure, and then there's administrative rule that doesn't necessarily need the full policy group to be modified or changed. Once you've done this work, I don't know why you wouldn't go through all of that. If you're like, I'm certainly not going to change it because they're your commitments to each other. It could be an exhibit that came after the code of ethics, right? So you could have the code of ethics policy, and this could be your exhibit that comes after it.
So would this go back to the policy committee?
The policy committee doesn't necessarily do the rules and exhibits. We usually just share them so that everybody knows, and then they come back to this team. So if you would like, for our next meeting, I could put the board member code of ethics, policy, action needed, and then put plus exhibit board norms, and you could vote on it then if that's your.
That sounds like a very good.
That sounds fine.
That sounds good.
Okay.
Understood with that?
Get ready before we move on, we skip
5.2.
gifts and grants.
I'm sorry, what's that?
We skip gifts and grants.
We did.
Before we jump to the next.
I'm
page.
just trying to remind him every time. All right, thank you. I just have one direction. Okay, so no further discussion on 5.5, so then we need to back up, I'm sorry, to 5.2, gifts and grants.
All right. Let me just finish my notes on that last one. All right, so we have two gifts. You have heard of that Share and Share Alike group in the past. Oh, she's got the other one up. Let's start there. So we had a student who went through our entire system who was just very dear to an awful lot of people. And when he passed away, Heather and Dan Dean wanted to make a donation to the special ed program in his memory. So that was very generous of them. We've recommend accepting the $250 from Heather and Dan Dean. And the other one is from that Share and Share Alike Foundation. We've talked about it before that they don't like to advertise who they are and what they're a part of. They run softball tournaments, and every year, a couple times, they just stop in and they drop off a check, and they don't attach any strings to it as to how they would like it spent. They just say, use this for kids. And so they've donated an additional $4,000 for that undesignated purpose. What we've done in the past is, like if there's a new teacher who maybe their classroom library doesn't have a lot of books in it, we will give them some of those additional funds. After you've been here a long time, you just have more resources in the classroom, but our classroom budgets already lean a little heavier towards new people, but we try to use these funds in meaningful ways to impact kids.
I move that.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'll make the motion to approve the gifts presented.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Next, I have 5.6, authorized deputy clerk.
A formality that we should do in the fall, and we didn't. And so as I was going through, we need to officially authorize Marty as the deputy clerk. She does an awful lot of the functions of that position, and so should have that formal action to be done.
I would love to approve that. Marty would do it because she does so much work.
I'll second.
Again, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion
You
carries.
accept, right, Marty?
Next is 5.7, open enrollment.
Yep, and so just a reminder to everyone that the open enrollment applications that you see here are the ones that happen during that traditional open enrollment window. And so there are so many applications that come in and out throughout the entire school year. This is just that formal window. Jill, I think we've got 2 PDFs. You're frozen if you're already there.
Sorry.
That's okay. Additionally, we only ask a parent to apply one time and then they're in our district. We don't ask them to apply repeatedly. When we get to the out page, you'll see some people, well, you won't see the names, but there's people who apply every year just because they don't have to, but they choose to. These are the students that are open enrolling in. These are all new students. You can see the grade levels and where they're at. I would say, we're going to see in a moment that the outs, of course, were quite disproportionate again. Here they are. However, I was very interested. I asked Joey to go back and look of the people who are open enrolling out, how many of them have attended our district. While, of course, we would love all of our students that live within the school district boundaries, we would like all of them to want to be here. It matters to me if they attended and had a really negative experience and then made a decision to go elsewhere, versus my parent works in Sparta and I'm going to ride with them to Sparta every day and go to school there, is just a different situation than somebody who was here and was not satisfied. The Grantsburg and McFarland and Appleton, those are all full virtual schools, so that means that those students can still live right in their houses here, and they will be taking, Medford is also a full virtual program, so that means you'll see some of our younger kids kicking into that we didn't necessarily have before. I think that's probably a result of COVID. So if you think about a second grader that has never attended school and is going to Medford, that child probably has never walked into kindergarten, first grade, and now looking at second grade. So some of these, like I said, are repeats, and you'll also notice these 3 are all the same student and these 3 are all the same student, but families will often apply for multiple schools because that just gives them the opportunity to go someplace else if they want to. Whereas those that are applying to come in, there's only one time they're asking us to come in. Those that are going out, those clusters there are the same kids. This is the same student, this is the same student applying to go to different opportunities. So just so that you know that it is not a one kid per line, because there's kids that send out families who send out multiple applications so that they can wait and make their choice in the fall, and they might come here in the fall. This really just gives them the opportunity to make another choice.
So one student is applying at Appleton, Grantsburg, and McFarland just because they have those online virtual programs, and they'll decide in the fall maybe if they'll go to one.
Absolutely. Okay. And so Grantsburg, I think, has been pretty aggressive with students who apply to go full virtual there, and then the student doesn't engage in the work at all, or very, very minimal. Because they're open enrolled in, they have written into their policy, they can reject the student and say, we are no longer accepting you, you need to leave. We don't have language like that in our open enrollment policy. We do say that if the student is habitually truant, we can discontinue the open enrollment at the end of a term, a semester or a trimester, but for low achievement, we don't have that written in there. The ones that come in throughout the rest of the school year, you don't have to approve because the reasoning on the page just says because it's in the best interest of the child. And so honestly, I bet in the average week, I get 2 to 5 of those every week throughout the school year.
And so you need a motion to accept as presented?
Yes,
please. So I'll make that motion to accept as presented.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
One more comment before we move on. The administrative team was talking about our open enrollment out and that list of students. It's been quite a few years since we reached out and we called all those families that are choosing another district. And so we all got fired up that we want to do it, and then time is busy, so we're hoping that that will be a June or an August project that we'd like to reach out to all those families that are open enrolling out and just ask if there's anything that we could do to help better meet their needs or just to get some feedback as to why they're making a choice to go elsewhere. So that has become a summer project, but one that we will certainly report back to the board once we have that information.
And next is 5.8, trademark.
I did not do any follow-up in between meetings, so I apologize. I will have it on my list for next month.
Well, what was the discussion there? Whether we were gonna possibly,
I had people call that were very upset that our.
Yeah, I knew that, but I was just wondering if we were looking at,
What is the process?
trademarking it or something?
What is the process?
That's what
How
we're looking at.
Okay.
aggressive is it? And
Yeah, well, I'll just give you my opinion on that right now. I don't think we need to move forward with that. I think that our logo is up for any use as it was created. I mean, I think, yes, was there some negativity around election time? Yeah, it depends on, who you were. But I also look at, hey, this design could be used for graduation cards and umpteen different things that could be, positive for the district. So I just don't think we need to pursue that.
I agree. Like one thing we did, we cut out a fire ring and donated to the athletic booster, and they did real well with that. And that was, I didn't have to call and ask permission or whatever. So it seemed like we're kind of wasting our efforts a little bit.
You did call or you did?
No.
Oh, you didn't, you just used it. It would be an extra step because people would have to call. I do understand that.
Right, and then if they did use it, or they didn't, call or get permission to use it, then they did, then you could have just a.
I wonder if most schools do trademark theirs or not. No idea.
I don't think so.
Kind of just making more problems really in a way, because it's, I don't know, we can go to court over somebody using it or something, what are you teaching our kids?
Like I said, it was made to represent our district.
Right.
It does send a mixed message at times. If it looked like we were representing the people that used it on their signs. That is the only problem that I had with it.
there was a public comment at one time too that somebody felt the district was supporting a political group based off of our logo being on that. And so I recognize we can say we didn't, it wasn't. And I don't know how to stop that. I'm just saying that there was a public comment about that same topic. So I've heard 3 people say that they're not interested in pursuing. I feel like I need to at least find out what the process is, and then I can put action, and then you can decide if you want to be done with it or not.
That's what I did.
All right, moving on, we've covered 6.1. Next we need 6.2, employment recommendations.
Yes, so you might know a gentleman named Brandon Jar who's kind of excited about our employment recommendations, right? He's grinning back there. We are excited to bring Brandon Jar on board as the principal at Red Creek Elementary. The staff overwhelmingly, you bet
We need to approve it first.
Hypothetically, he's going to be the principal at Red Creek Elementary. The staff was incredibly excited about having Brandon there for the consistency, and so many of them talk about the incredible relationships that he has built with both students, staff, and with families as well. You will recognize 2 other names under the new hire. Mr. Brad Lobenstein is coming back to us. He taught English here at the high school for many, many years, and then he went to be a brewer, not a baseball player brewer, but a brewer, and is coming back to the middle school as an instructional coach. And so he and Tony Berger will be partners there. And then Joey Barnett was a student here who graduated probably 2015 is my guess, maybe 2014. But he was a very strong music student when he was here, has taught for a couple of years in a small district down along the Mississippi. I can't remember which one, and we're thrilled to have him come back. Is that it? Thank you. His mom is even more excited to have him come back to teach in town, so that's exciting. And then we found an art teacher to take the spot that Miss Dahl is leaving as she moves up to the high school. So there's still an awful lot of hiring to be done. Our special ed candidate pool is way smaller than we were hoping for, like extremely small. We had 3 candidates for a middle school job and 2 agreed to come in for interviews. So we're going to be in a tough spot. An example, we think of some of those specialty areas as being more challenging. Last week, 5th grade, we had 2 applicants for 5th grade general classroom teaching job. It wasn't that long ago we had 50. When I was an elementary principal, there was like 100 for that job. So
There was like 250.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Yeah, so concerning for sure.
Well, that's something the counselors could work on. You know, there's
Career preparation.
career opportunities.
We did kind of say that we work so hard at preparing kids for work experiences in every different field, and we don't do an intentional, here's an experience, be ready for teaching. When we had our after school program, that was really great because the high school kids that were interested in going into education could go work over there and actually get paid for it and were blessed supervisors. But without that program, we don't have as many opportunities. We do have some teachers assistants from the high school. In fact, there's an early graduate from the high school who we hired as a special ed aide at the middle school for the last trimester, and she's doing fantastic. So we're hoping that some of those people stick and are interested in diving in. So.
I move to accept employment recommendations as presented.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, moving on, attorney-client privilege, 6.3.
At our last meeting, we had some conversation about where that line was and what it meant, and so I did some digging, the district is the client of our attorney, and the board collectively, as an extension of the district, is also part of that client. And so, like in everything the board does, as an individual board member, you have very little authority. As a collective group, you have all the authority. And so when one individual board member shares legal advice, they don't have the authority to do that. That individual is waiving the attorney-client privilege, and one member doesn't have the authority to do that. So I just wanted to clear that up moving forward. If it is legal advice, it is protected by attorney-client privilege. Individually, you do not have the authority to waive that privilege. It would take an act of the full board in order to waive that. There's been a request for the advice to be taken down. I'm uncertain where that is at right now. The other piece that I wanted to just talk about is we had a lot of conversation about the board packet and where it resides and who has access to it. And I wasn't thinking of it along these lines at the time. When a principal sends something out to all their parents, that becomes a record that they are freely sharing with anyone. When we send out a school messenger with any attachments to it, we are saying anybody can have access to this information. When I send things to a closed group, I'm creating records for the district for certain, and we've got a whole record retention policy. And I just wanted to remind people that in that policy, 823, it says the district administrator or designee is responsible for overseeing the creation and implementation of rules and operating procedures that further govern records management in the district, including the safekeeping, the protection of personal privacy, maintaining the district's capacity, blah, 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 all those things. I am the custodian of records for the district, therefore I am the only one authorized to release those records that have only been released to a closed group. And so just to liken this, if I send something to the whole admin team and a board member wanted that information, I would expect that that administrator would come to me and say, Shelley is the keeper of records, can we share this out? And then I would likely make that happen. And so per board policy, that is the closed group, that is the school board, that when I give you things, and as we talked about it, once it's up on the screen, it 100% becomes a public record then, because it has been shared and displayed and all of those things. But I am the custodian of records. And so I just wanted to try to clear up. We talked a lot about this in our norms, and I it got to be a long evening and I wasn't thinking of that record custodian. That's why all the open records requests come to me, because I'm the formal per policy custodian of records. So if you want that to remain, then we're good. If you want that changed and would like to propose other language, then we would need to revise board policy as it currently sits. Questions, comments, concerns, interested in changing board policy?
So it says action needed here.
I was uncertain if you don't want to follow
Okay.
board policy, then that's going to take action to change that.
I'm good with board policy.
And do.
I'm good with the way it is.
No one wants changes?
This is typical of school districts, this is how it operates. Makes sense.
Hearing nothing, then I think we can move on because we don't actually need to take action on that item. We have 7.1 Tiger Investment Club reports.
And I did not include it because the Tiger Investment Club is having their banquet this Wednesday. I believe they sent an invite to all board members. It is 5:30 at the Skyline. They do an interactive presentation, and so after they share it there, I'm sure they will, I can ask Jared for it and I can send it out to you guys so that you can see it. If you can join at 5:30 on Wednesday at the Skyline, they host a dinner and a lot of the parents of the kids come, and it's always a really good time. So tough year for investing, just to be sure. It's no reflection on the kids at all, but it's a tough year for those investments. But they do a real nice job, so.
Good to learn in both types of markets. They've had it too easy for 2 years.
Right.
Next is item 7.3, the Ad Hoc Committee on Gender Support Plan. And I'd like to hear from those who were able to attend last Thursday. So that was Tom, Mary Jo, and Troy, is that correct?
I kind of like the format that we used. What Shelley did was she divided us all randomly into groups. There were 4 community or board or whatever people, and then a facilitator in the group. And you just got a card and you had to go to that group. So everybody got to give their own feelings, and talk freely with the group. And I really like that. And after we had time, we had little sticky cards and we put essential things to keep in the plan and concerns. And then after so long, Shelley took all those little sticky notes and we talked through all those and people could get their questions answered. So I thought it was a successful format, for sure.
So do you want to put up that document 7.3? I think it's just right again. That's it, thank you.
Yeah, I like the format as well, and I was, well, I don't know if I guess I would say I was pleasantly surprised as to, that I think for the most part, I mean, everybody there kind of understood that there is a need or an issue. How we go about it might be, there might be varying opinions to that, but we also went piece by piece with this proposal or with the plan, and I don't know. I thought it was pretty straightforward, and everything there. I would think if families are going to go into this, that they can answer these questions, and also a great opportunity for the school to have this information and the counselors. I just thought it was a good meeting.
And it really stressed that nothing is done without the parent.
Right.
So to speak, and I think that was important.
And I was reminded several times that this is not a binding contract.
I still have the initial concern was, the format was excellent, I think, as far as it grew a discussion with people, and a small group discussion, I think, is more productive than a large group. But then we never did get to the point where we never did ask the question if the plan is necessary or not. We made this, the committee was just an assumption about discussing the plan itself, but not actually if the implementation of the plan was necessary. So that was one thing I felt was a little lacking, but I did like the fact that we did have to have all the facilitators were available to every individual to discuss things. That was actually pretty helpful. my other concern is I don't know any other time that we've ever had a discussion of this level that had this much public input into it, that we've never had a board decision, basically a board vote. When we had the COVID protocols, we had a board vote. When we've talked about, you can name, I don't know what thing, but it's always resulted in a board vote. And this one, for some reason, this subject here doesn't seem to, according to the administrator, doesn't require a board vote. But if we were talking about changing how the IEPs work, we'd have feedback. I don't know if we'd vote on it necessarily, but if it was something certificate where the policy would change how we do an IEP, it would require a board vote. So my question is how this again is the needs there are for mental health, because one of the first slides you brought up was the incidence of mental health issues percentage-wise between breaking down to two different demographic groups. And I think that is accurate. I don't question that at all. But my next question was, does affirming a single group that is in need, where is the study that proved that that's actually going to solve that dilemma of mental health? I haven't seen this evidence that the plan doesn't show that. The facilitators are unaware of that. Basically that was a question that was brought up during the meeting actually as well, at HOP committee, and we never had evidence of that. And I looked around for it and I can't find it yet because there's two reasons I think. One is they don't have the data because it's new. But the second thing is I'm not sure it exists. So that's a personal opinion part, the second part, but I'm just saying it's something that sometimes you can manipulate data to make it look the way you want it to too. So there's no study, because if you do any other mental health situation where if a student is suffering from depression, we don't give that student basically, well, you're depressed, so we're going to give you some, basically something that would enable the depression any further. It doesn't make a lot of sense. If we don't give a student who wants to harm themselves a weapon to harm themselves. So how we look at this is if we say, oh, you see yourself differently, so we're just going to say, yep, you're all different. And I think it's not just a trivial thing. This is a large thing where it does affect everyone, because it is taking an observation that we all make that's part of being a human, and it was switching your output to say, well, you're right, that is not blue, that's red. And that's hard for a lot of people to accept. It's not about fear, it's just about where do we draw the line to say, I understand you're hurting, I want to help you, but I cannot go and make myself say that your solution is going to be the answer that's going to serve you and others around you. And that's the difficulty I have. I mean, I can go into a lot of it too, but the group this came from is a group out of San Francisco area, and their website is extremely informative of what we use their template, but what their plans are or what their goals are as far as communities and how they want to help them. It goes into a lot of detail about how they don't necessarily want parents involved. In fact, there's a whole section about how to work around parents not being affirming with their student. I'm not saying that's what was presented to us, but I'm just saying we should look at where it comes from. And the reason I say that is because back in November we had a parental rights proclamation, and this board went ahead and did the research on it. And the research was, well, there's too political, we don't want to support that. So the same application applies here. Let's look where this came from. And I did that and I said, well, this is where it came from. It's called genderspectrum.org is what they have a website. And it's like I said, there's a lot of information on there, and I can't support what they stand for right now. I do understand that there's a need in this community, especially in the middle school. That's what the majority of this was talking about. I think there's a way to go about it without implementing a plan, or at least if we do implement a plan, that we're going to have the full board vote on it. That's all I'm asking. So right now, I know that's not on the cards, but I like the future. Maybe we talked about it before, if we implement this plan, it wouldn't be till the fall anyway, so maybe we could talk about it in an upcoming meeting too, where it comes to a board vote if this plan will be accepted or not.
I know all of us have received information about take this to policy committee, bring it to the board, have the board involved. And as the previous president, I just want to remind everybody, policy committee did address the gender support plan on April 4th. And then it was brought to the April 18th meeting, as you just recall that we discussed it. And that's when we decided that the ad hoc committee was what we wanted to hear from more people and wanted the process and the discussion to continue. And so I hear tonight, we've all gotten emails on it, that board get involved in it. And I don't know how the confusion of all that happened. Because the board has been involved and the policy committee has been involved along with.
And just to be clear, I think I can speak for all administration. I don't care if you want to vote on it. This is not me trying to not let you vote. I don't know what it is. It's not a policy. It is to be honest, it's a record of conversations between a parent, a child, and the admin or the counselor. So if you want to vote, I'm comfortable with that. I did want to just share you had said that anything else and it would come to a full vote. That's not necessarily the case. Like, the buildings change their format for parent-teacher conferences all the time, and the board doesn't vote on those. We change our open house. A parent will come in and ask for a schedule change because their child has anxiety, and we just do it. So I just want to be...
So you're...
They don't all come to the board. They don't. I brought it to the policy committee because I knew people had a very strong reaction to it. So these other things, we just make those decisions and we make it happen. Your job is policy. There's nothing in policy that says if we're going to have a conversation between a guardian and their child and the counselor, it must be in a board-approved plan. So, to be honest, I tried to engage people in conversation about it. We didn't have to do that. So I just want to be clear, the board doesn't vote on every one of those things.
Other districts have that in their policy, actually.
So if that's what you want, then make that proposal.
I'm just saying, it's a policy it went to their policy committee, went through policy. Menominee is where this originated, for this idea came from, according to Ms. Tibbetts, which I appreciate. So that's what she went to there, and they talked about what they did, and they have a policy. And they actually implemented their policy in 2018, and then just now they're actually, in just April of this year, they actually brought this to the board. The exact same plan. Ours derives from what they did their research on. And so, I don't think it's a trivial thing, like changing your scheduling about parent-teacher conferences. I'm not saying, I think that's actually dismissal of what significance of this is. This is a cultural shift, and I think in order to totally absorb, to make sure that's something that everybody feels a stakeholder, they have a stake in, people elected the board, and the board basically goes through stuff like this. This is part of what a board is. It basically says, hey, people have a subject they want to discuss and they want to talk about it. We want the board to review it and we want the board to actually take action on it. I think this is a response for the 2 meetings now. We had a regular meeting with a large presence, and then we've had an ad hoc with a really good turnout, I believe. I think that's engagement enough, or I think it should go before the board before we implement. That's all.
And you talked about that it's not really hurting anyone. This is something we can do that can help someone, and you said that there's not really a lot of information out there that would document whether this is helpful or not. I did reach out to a transgender adult, and I showed her the form that we were thinking of, and this is what she said. I wrote it down. She said, I wish that there would have been something to help me spread awareness of who I am and what my pronouns were. I changed my name when I was in high school, and it took a long time to get the faculty on board. It's hard to be different, and even with the LGBTQ being more acceptable now, the internal struggle that she had was real. Middle school was a time where I felt that internal conflict, so if there were resources to help, why not provide it? This would have been so helpful to me and several others. I would have felt more accepted and respected. So I think if we can provide a document that would make a student feel that way, I don't see any harm in that. I don't think it hurts anyone. It only helps those people.
I think this is this kind of discussion we should have if we do a vote. This is exactly what you discussed, because that's where I think we have a lot of people who would say that it does affect people, some students and some parents in a negative way. I'm not going to go into details why, but I'm just saying there's that is out there, and I think that's where the conversation needs to go. And I don't know if just allowing it to be implemented without any kind of discussion is worthwhile, or do we sit there and discuss this tonight? Because I know it's on the agenda. I don't know. I don't know what the best plan, because I say once it's voted on, then at least it has the majority of the board's backing, and I think that's fine. Otherwise,
I'm okay with voting on it if that's where you want to go. I'm totally good with that. Talking with it was a good representation of our community, I thought, at the ad hoc committee, and maybe that's what we should have done, is taken a straw poll. How many of you are in favor of it? We didn't do that. But I don't think it's their decision anyway, it's ours to make.
The board, yeah, the policy is of the board's, yeah, exactly. The board just basically votes on approves policy.
So if I could just offer, I'm thinking about this, and I'm great, again, I'm not afraid of you taking a vote on this. Is it a form, that we're approving a form? Is it, policies were cited about discrimination? This isn't about that, because it's really about a support.
It's a help. It's a
Yeah,
help.
so, I mean, I can put it on as an action item, and do you want it to be a policy, or do you just want it to be our form that we use to support students?
It's part of the student, there is a health policy right now too. We support our students' health as far as possible. If that was just, you don't have to make it, it should be something, this plan is underneath that, would be underneath that header. You don't have to add to the policy, but you can say, this plan is now accepted by the board under this policy, because it's not, like you said, not its own individual policy, but basically a
Addendum
to what it already existed. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be explicitly laid out there.
That's our word.
Exhibit.
Exhibit.
Thank you is the proper word. I appreciate it. But that's where I'm going with that. So that way you say, this is what we approved it, so why not, or disapproved it, whatever we do. So that's where I was at.
So what is our mechanism for exhibits?
Let's just vote on it. I mean, they can be anything you want it to be. There's board policy about how we adopt policy. Exhibits, again, I brought it to you for input, so we can just bring it back, and then at the bottom of it, we could put board approved
So
on.
it doesn't need to go back to policy subcommittee again in June?
You wouldn't have to.
No, the way I was explaining it, I don't think it needs to, because it's
Already been there.
Yep.
I like to just say my thoughts a little bit. I have a son too. He's Jonathan J. And we've called him JJ since day one. He's not a transgender. He's a boy. He's happy. And whatever. The way I feel about it is, if you really want to change your name, why don't you? And if it's that important to you, just do it legally. Because if that's what you really want, work at it. Anything that's worth doing is worth working at. And why does the school have to be the stairway to get to where you want to be? Work at it. And it seems like more policies is just, obviously if they support them, counsel them, treat them well, but why do you need more policies?
And to be honest, this is why I didn't propose it as a policy. It is meant to be a communication tool. And so it's a communication tool between the counselor, the parent, and the student. That's what it is. It's a tool to ask all the questions so that the counselor's not having to call back all the time. So we can put it under policy if that's going to make people feel better, because then there's a formal action. It's great. What we are looking for is an internal communication tool so that we are crystal clear with the parent, the child, and the school how that child is going to be referred to and in what settings and which restroom, the single-use bathroom, all of those things. We just want absolute clarity. So it doesn't have to be a policy, it's a communication tool, but we feel like we need it, because right now our counselor is calling the same parent 8 times during the school year when something else comes up, asking questions about different pieces. So it can be whatever you guys want it to be. The staff is asking for a place to collect all that information in one place.
And it really, the true value of this is it sparks a conversation between the school, students, and the family. That's really, that's the value. And I don't care if it was around gender, or we have students with high levels of social anxiety or depression or whatever it is, we can support them as a district to feel more welcome. We know that we need to improve our attendance measures, and if we can make students feel welcome, hopefully more of them are coming to school more often, and then achievement scores follow. That's I think that's really the value of this, is it's a conversation.
And it's something that, 10 or 15 years ago, we're not used to this. But it is out there, and these kids need our help and our support, and after talking with that individual, the struggles that she went through, and she's a wonderful adult. She is transgender. She's a wonderful person. But she had these struggles in middle school. They were real. she dealt with them fairly well. You know, she said it was hard, but a lot of kids aren't dealing with it really well. You know, those are the kids that are going home and wanting to commit suicide because they can't deal with it or they aren't being accepted. So I just think anything we can do to help those kids is a positive step.
I heard over and over from the staff, the kids don't have nearly the challenge with it as the adults do.
I think
Kids
it's us.
just naturally
Yeah, I think it's us.
pardon me, kids just naturally adapt, and it's the adults that have the greater meaning behind it and more challenges with that.
Well, I discussed a little bit of small group too, but basically kids look to teachers to provide positive values for them. The difficulty lies in what you value as positive values. That's where it comes into. And it's not that anyone ever wants to not support any individual. It's just when that becomes contentious with someone's faith, you're going to have pushback. And that's where a lot of this, not all of it, a lot of it too is perceptions and certain realities that certain people face, and they don't see the same end. The ends don't justify the means in this one. That's where, you know, basically just even the viewing what's a safe place is a contentious issue as well, because is it safe from physical harm? Is it safe from, you know, thoughts that you don't appreciate? Is it safe from basically the being judged? All these things. It can be it depends on how you're feeling at the moment what a safe place is. I mean, some people find that being alone in a room is not safe because that's where their anxiety flares up. There's a lot of different ways to look at a safe place. So that's all. And so basically, you don't want to create a safe place for one group and then by doing so, take a safe place for another group away. By basically, if they're not allowed to express themselves about how they feel about things, now you've just shifted the burden over to another group, and that's where it gets difficult. I don't really want any group to suffer. I think a conversation is a positive thing, but I also think that's something that basically goes back to where if we're going to do that, it falls under actually, I think, two lines. It does fall under the human growth and development, not the core curriculum, but the subject matter of the human growth and development is part of it. And that was actually part of the discussion during that meeting was when do we bring up these issues and what grade level do we discuss them? And that was part of it, and that the board approved at 7th grade that that's when the first references in the core curriculum come to these subjects. And so basically, we established that as a core curriculum, and the board approved it, and now we're going to go ahead and say, well, now let's actually talk about it even younger. And that's where a lot of people feel threatened by that. In the sense where we agreed to something, and now we're going to change it and say we're going to throw it in there at 5th grade.
But we're not talking to kids about it. We're helping children that are experiencing it. We're not.
Since we're having a discussion, if we're picking up a PA, we're putting in the yearbooks, we're exposing the kids to it. That's how we're doing it. And if the teachers are addressing them, now it has basically it has it's authority to it behind it because the teacher is the authority in the classroom when it comes to behavior and how expected behaviors and stuff like that. So there is now that it's not core curriculum, but it is part of the school now addressing and accepting a certain type of behavior, and that's where it's difficult because we've said over here we're going to do it, and now we're going to push it back even further up to here. So that's earlier. So that's where
I understand we aren't going to agree on because we have different values with it.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to explain what so that's why I think that's why the board should say yes as an exhibit. This is what the board approves, and this is why. And I think it's a fair.
So you think we should vote?
I think so, yes, in an upcoming meeting, yes.
Duly noted.
Further discussion?
I just feel it gets misinterpreted at so many levels. I mean, this came to policy committee as transparency of something to help kids, and we look at helping all children in whatever they need. And it was discussed that can it be a 504? No, it can't be a 504, but it's kind of similar to that. The child needs this support and we can provide that. I don't necessarily see that it has to be policy because that's not what it was intended to do. So it's a communication tool, but I'm okay with it, but it gets misinterpreted and blown up like it's a bigger deal than what it is.
It's helping a few kids.
Yeah.
It's addressing a few kids. I don't know if I like to see it as policy.
I personally would not.
I don't like to see it as
It could be
policy.
I don't see it
under
as
some-
policy either. I see it like as a communication tool as it was
brought to our attention.
I guess another thought is like, I know when I started this gig, you told me that like it's always, whatever's best for the kids is always, you know, what you probably should do. And I really question this, if, you know, what is best for the kids though? Is it, you know, being able to do whatever and be whatever you want to be? Or, you know, in life, you know, I think that people that are successful, they need to know how to fail to be successful. Which I see this all the time, you know. If you can't fail, it's hard to be successful because you're scared of failure, you know. That might be, you know, asking a girl to prom, or she might say no. I'm starting a business, I might fail, I better not do this, you know. So, you know, it's just like being able to fail and being able to accept failure and be happy with it and make the most of it, you know. And it's not really about failure as like this, but it's, you know, if you change your gender, I feel you're kind of like, you're giving up, you know. It's like, okay, this wasn't for me, I'm gonna try this. It'll be better, you know, but is it gonna be better? And another thing, like you said, like that, whoever you talk to, okay? Mm-hmm. But I mean, on the flip side, there could be a person that said, okay, in school this was so easy, so I decided to change my sex, okay? And then like say 20 years from now, they could say, that was the worst mistake of my life.
They could,
You know?
for sure.
So it's like, what do you promote? I mean, obviously you gotta support the kids, whatever, but I mean, I think you can't like just say, okay, sign up here, you know.
I'm not promoting it at all. I'm just trying to help those kids.
Right, but
You know, I was a teacher, second grade, and I taught a lot of kids. And at second grade level, I mean, there's nothing wrong with being gay or different. I had an inkling which ones at second grade would end up.
Sure.
It's just the way they are. There's nothing wrong with them. It's just the way they are. And you and I, it's hard to understand that. But it's just who they are. They don't choose that. It's just who they are. There will be a few in 7th grade, like someone said, could copycat and really, you know, that'll happen. But they will,
Because it might be
they
cool
will,
or whatever, you know.
exactly, but they
It's
will
like wearing
phase
your
out of
pants
that.
tight
But there are
versus
truly
falling off
people
or,
that are like
you know.
that. That's just the way they are. I you know, I want to help all kids. They're all different. There's nothing wrong with them. They're just people.
I mean, it's just thinking about what's really best for the kids though, and it's
what
kind
I
of confusing.
It is very confusing.
And sometimes if you don't know what to do, sometimes not doing things the best answer, but I don't know.
I hear that this is also new. It's not new. This, I mean, I've been out of school for 50 years. Had my 50-year class reunion when I was in school. We had kids that needed help, that didn't get help. I mean, this isn't all new. All of us have been around long enough to know people and know victims in the family. I would guarantee you, if we can be open about it and trust.
But I also look at too, we're not the students, you know, and you've talked to one and we're not them. We don't know what they need. And I know that they need our support, and we don't know what it would feel like for them to show, you know, the board and the school district has their interests at hand, at heart, I should say. You know, being transgender does not define who they are. God, they go to church, they have homework. I mean, we get this mindset of transgender. It's almost like, you know, they're a leper or something like that. They're not. You know, they want to be loved. They want to eat food. They have needs. They have wants. And I think just to support them and who they are, because their gender identity does not define who they are. It really doesn't. You might think, well, that's who they want to be, but it doesn't define who they are.
And it's not just the students, it's the family, right? I mean, this is a school district, parent, students, three-way meeting. You know, this is not us deciding for that student. This is not us deciding for the parent. This is the parent, the child, and the school talking about this.
I agree with that part of it. I think with you, those three parties, that is perfectly acceptable, and I think that's commendable that we're actually trying to help those students navigate with their parents these big issues. And I don't think anyone ever wants to condemn any of these children and say they're not unique individuals. Every single one of those children, no matter how they identify, is a worthwhile person, completely. The only issue with this plan is the identification by outside parties, not those three groups, not the student, not the student's parents, and not the school itself. The issue is how they're how they're acknowledged, how they're addressed outside of that. And basically, what we're doing then is it becomes something more than just a three-way conversation, because now you're inviting the public in at large, and that's where it becomes different. And living a certain lifestyle does bring in people to basically, you're going to be exposed to them. If somebody who dresses even poorly makes a statement, or basically they want to clash, or whatever you want to call it. Basically, there's always those groups. We all went to school. There was always certain demographics of people who would dress a certain way or have their hair style a certain way. They were making a statement about themselves, and that sometimes their beliefs are what they're trying to say about the world around them. I get that. So it is something it transcends the three parties that are involved, because it is something that is culturally significant right now. It's no different than a person of faith who carries around a Bible. Student carries around. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever, and nobody would say anything's wrong with that. But the student is making a statement about something, and that's what we're talking about with this too. So it's not an issue of not caring about them or even arguing the fact that they can't do that. I don't think anyone's saying these two students have no right to do what they want to do. The issue is just the rights of the students around them and the teachers. And then also the parents too, that maybe don't want their children exposed to something that's going to be condoned by the district. It's a conversation the parents want to have with their students, their own students, but the district is kind of putting that to the forefront now. That's going to happen earlier, and that's where the issue is. Because now the school is addressing a student in a certain way. And so all I'm saying is the board would vote on it. It's transparent. The board the board says they accept that this is what's going to happen. This conversation is going to happen. This is what they want to do, and now it's done. Or not. I mean, exactly. It's just I think it's something that it's worthwhile to actually have an action from the board to say this is what we support. And that's where that's why I'm making it. So I like a motion that we can actually bring this up. It's actually part of the last part of the agenda that we talked about future agenda items. And so I don't really want to make a motion on it, but I would like to bring this on the future agenda item.
I already have it written down. You
already wrote it down. So as long as everybody's in agreement with that part of it, I would appreciate it. If not, I understand too.
So if we vote on it, would it have to be next time?
Yes. Okay. Which I think is okay, because I don't think the counselors are looking in the next 13 days to have those conversations. I think it would just naturally be something back to school anyway. So I don't think it would be a hindrance at all.
Well, just to find out too, you haven't finalized the final plan though either, because there was some during the ad hoc committee, there were some suggestions I believe that you were going to amend. You guys, yeah, exactly. So it's not a finalized item, and it will evolve, I assume, if it gets implemented as it goes too, I'm sure.
Then if it's board approved, it's going to have to continue to come back to you, just to be clear.
And that's my concern, is that I see this as a tool that can be used, or a very similar tool for all of those other things, right? So if a student wants to carry around a Bible, how can we support that student as a district, right? Mm-hmm. If a student has social anxiety, right? So this could be, I don't call it a gender support plan, a student support plan. This is one specific. Gender is a specific type of support. It entails things that are slightly different, but if a student had anxiety, let's figure out a plan, right? And if that's and that I hope is a discussion between, again, student, parent, and the school.
If it's anxiety, it's a lot of different things. That's a 504 plan. That's part of, I was doing more research on too. Gender dysphoria is not considered a part of that. It's actually explicitly removed from that 504, so that's why it's not in there. That's why I believe this plan has been derived, because it doesn't actually handle that part of it.
And I'm just going to remind everyone that this communication tool goes into a lot more detail than a 504, because this is really meant to dive deeper into all of the different scenarios that could come up during school, whereas a 504 typically talks about what academic accommodations or modifications need to be made in order for the student to be successful in class, whereas the questions on this plan aren't necessarily about their academics at all. It's more about their way of being in the building.
Right, the 504 deals with more, their mental illness, whatever mental health issues, I don't want to say illness.
Health.
Mental health.
And I didn't mental, if
This is
I'm
health,
looking
yeah.
for any health
Okay.
that impairs their opportunity to learn.
There's a subcategory called mental health in there too, that's why I brought it up. But yes, exactly, that's one of the health conditions, so, and this is not on that 504 though, so.
So if we put it on next month's agenda and we vote on it, then it has to come back to us every year to approve that?
Not every year, just if there's changes, we recommend
If
it.
there's changes, okay.
I'm gonna do some looking at policies and see which one it seems to nest under best, because I can't pull them out of the sky, so I'll do some checking.
I don't know, I'd like to know how the board feels if they want this a policy or not. Or if it's even an addendum or an exhibit, I don't know. Or is this just a tool? I'd like to know how everybody feels on
Well, I
that.
see that's a communication tool, not policy.
I agree with
I don't think it's policy.
I'll go back to why it should be an exhibit, because if a document goes and it can be evolving without any kind of review process, it could change considerably from what its original intent is. And that's where I go back to looking at that website where this came from. And I'm sure, in the future, maybe someone wants to indent something, and that may be something that people will want to know about. So therefore, a policy review, it just means that you look at it, and if you have no problem with it, you just move on.
And so I don't read every policy every year, folks, just to be really clear. If you want to talk about it every year, that core agenda conversation that we just had is where it should live, honestly.
Yeah.
So we don't go through all 800, all the series of policy every year. We work our way through them as best we can. So if it's something you want to look at every year, then core agenda would be.
But that wouldn't necessarily be the expectation if we did make it an
I
exhibit.
don't want to look at it every year.
An exhibit would not get looked at every year.
That's right. That's what I'm asking. Yeah, that's what I'm stating. So it'd just be there unless something changed, and then that's when we come up for review again at that point. It'd go to the policy committee first because it's not the process. So then the board would actually have a way to look at it as a policy committee. Okay.
As a board member, you could call me on a Tuesday and say, hey, could I look at the most recent version of the gender support plan? And I'd say, sure. So, I mean.
But then we're not allowed to share that out at that point too, so there we go.
As the administrator, where do you think it should fall? That's what I'd like to know.
I wanted the community to have the conversation because I don't want anyone to think we're doing anything behind closed doors. So I wanted the community to have the conversation. I feel like it is a communication tool. I feel like, I don't even think there should be like a note in the student handbook that says, hey, questioning your gender, go talk to your counselor about a plan. That's not gonna happen, right? I feel like it is a tool that our counselor has, that if a student comes and talks to them, and that counselor engages, I mean, if you look at that plan, that's gonna be a couple hours of conversation between that parent and that student and that counselor. I feel like it's a tool that our counselors have available to them. And if you want to keep reviewing it to make sure it doesn't modify into something that you're uncomfortable with, we can put it on our core agenda that once a year you just look at it or don't, that's your choice, right? I feel like the conversation was what was most important, elevating it to policy. I feel like the purpose for that is to say that board at that time voted on that. And I hear you when you say that's formal action. I think everyone in the room could count straws and figure out how that vote is going to go. And so I don't know if that is essential to happen or not, or I don't know the value added of that. The conversation happened, and that's what's most important to me. Whether it comes down to a vote or not is irrelevant to me.
So could we just say right here and now, take a straw poll of the board who wants it just as a communication tool instead of an exhibit?
I don't know if you
I'd
can do
like
that
to
legally.
add that as a board, our responsibility is to hire professional, trained people to do their jobs. And I see what has happened here with the communication, that those counselors have done what they were hired to do. They are addressing the needs that they see and looking to the future, what could make their job more meaningful and helping the kids. And Dr. Severson brought it to policy council, policy committee. I'm back in my historic days, policy committee to discuss, and then they voted to bring it to full board. I mean, I think we're going through that process, we're getting the conversation going. But our responsibility, I think, is to hire the experts to do what they're doing. And I applaud them for reaching out and doing this difficult work for our kids. I still will kind of go back. I think it was meant to be a communication tool, and I'm happy with what they're doing.
And we gave people a chance to be on that ad hoc committee. They were there, they gave input.
I think that if you want to say that stakeholders were involved in the process, you vote on it. That's what it boils down to, because the stakeholders contact the board members, which is a community at large, and say support or not support. And at that point, you wanted to represent your constituents as the best way you see fit, and that's why you vote. There's no different than voting on our WIIAA participation. I don't want, there's people that may say I don't want to be part of that conference, others not, basically I don't want to operate under their rules. All that stuff, that's why we vote on stuff, is because it's a formal approval or disapproval of those actions. And that's why I'm asking you to bring it to a vote.
And I would be comfortable bringing it to a vote as a communication plan more than a.
It can do that, it doesn't
I
have
would
to
rather
live
do
in
it that
policy.
way.
You guys could just decide at the next meeting that it is going to be a board of resource for our school counselors.
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay. So there it is. It will be on next month's agenda. 7.4, student success report, standards-based communication.
So I'm here again to talk about standards-based grading, and I have a handout for you that summarizes the 8 principles of standards-based grading. And today I'm going to be talking about the second principle that's on your handout, and that is to separate behavior and academic scores on the report card. So you had this document in front of you before, which is the summary of the principle, but I just wanted a little bit to explain a little bit more about it. So we all know that some students struggle because they cannot master the content. And some kids may struggle because they have not mastered responsible behaviors. On the other hand, there may be some students who struggle with content, but they excel at responsible behaviors, which can lead to grade inflation. In either case, traditional grades do a really poor job at letting parents know exactly what their child excels at. So in standards-based grading, the teacher will report out a separate grade for that student's academic achievement and that student's behaviors in school. So where this comes a challenge for some people is the question around student motivation and what truly motivates a child to learn. So traditional grading is built on the assumption that student learning is motivated by the grade itself, whether that student gets a 100%, a 0, an A, or an F. Research tells us that student learning actually stops at the point where a grade is placed on that evidence of that child's learning. Instead, when students are given clear feedback, which is one of our grade 8 strategies, on their performance, increasing learning continues after, it continues on, and it has an effect size of 0.7. So as parents and teachers, our ultimate goal is to shift student learning from motivation from external factors, like that of a grade, to internal motivation, so that students have that self-efficacy they need to learn and grow. So this principle of separating behavior and academics supports both self-efficacy and clear communication about a student's grading or learning. Excuse me. Does anyone have any questions about either the handout itself or the separation of?
Just wanted to remind everyone too that tomorrow night is our standards-based education forum. I sent a school messenger a a week and a half ago to families, and then today did a Facebook post to remind them. 6 o'clock p.m. in the high school LMC. We'll start with a larger group presentation, and then the elementary will go one space and the secondary will go another space. I hope we're on a roll with community engagement. We had a nice representation at our committee last Thursday. I'm hopeful that we get a nice group that is interested in having conversations around this on Tuesday.
Have you had any feedback, whether people are coming?
Zero.
Zero. That's scary.
But I also didn't ask for RSVP, whereas Thursday's group I asked for an RSVP, so.
So is this on the same 4-point, right, we're using a 4-point scale? Is behavior also on the same 4-point scale? Is that how we're doing that? Or I know you got some of this as work in progress.
Yes, well, I have a pretty definitive answer. So we'll have a 4-point scale for middle school and high school achievement scoring, 3-point scale for student behavior all the way through, and then a 3-point scale for academic achievement in the elementary. That's where we've landed.
And is behavior just a single, or I see you have, is there 8 characteristics there? Is behavior just a single, like behavior 3?
It's going to differentiate by elementary and secondary by building. So each building has come up with characteristics of a successful learner as far as behavior is concerned, but they all are along the lines of, turning work into that responsibility type of work. And
so does each characteristic gets a score, or
each characteristic gets a score.
So does that get averaged then for the total outcome, or is it just
It does not get averaged into the outcome.
So they'll have 8 different scores every report card for each subject.
So
I'm just trying to
Yes.
understand how the
Right.
parent's going to decipher that.
you'll end up with a course. Let's just talk about the secondary, for example.
Okay, sure.
You will end up with a single grade, academic achievement grade at the end, but you'll also be able to see how that child performed on each of the standards within that course.
Okay.
And then additionally, there will be the behavior grade, which is really, like, when you think about parent-teacher conferences, I think about them as I went, what do you want to know? Or as a teacher, what do parents typically want to know? Is my child getting along well with others? Is my child being respectful to you as the teacher? And is my child doing their work? Right? You also want to know about their learning, but those are really typically the top questions on many parents' minds. Definitely my own children.
Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Just a couple things. I mean, I guess I look at this as like, the goal of teaching these kids is to turn out people that are successful, okay? So like number 1, allowed multiple attempts at mastery. I mean, like if I hired a welder and it took them 10 times to do it versus once, it's not so good, I think being able to one and done is very important, And number 4, full credit for late work. I mean, I think schedules are important and being able to deadlines and stuff, like I bid jobs, they're due at 2 o'clock. If I hand in a 2:01, garbage.
Right.
So I think that in the real world, like 1 and 4 kind of contradict
So,
life.
I would love to just for full clarity.
Sure.
So, because we are separating out, we're still communicating with parents. When you turn that work late, you're going to see that in your behavior grade, so that you know how your child is doing. So we want to go back to what is the purpose of grading, and our real purpose here is to communicate clearly with parents the progress that your child is making. So we want to communicate how they're doing with those behavior types of things, like turning your work in late or not being respectful. But at the same time, as a parent, you want to know, did my child learn how to read that paragraph? I can know that because I can look at the standard and see where they're doing right there.
Well, it just says here that like late credit is full credit, doesn't say anything about like the behavior grade will be affected.
Yeah, it all kind of, definitely, it all works together. It's complex.
Part of that whole thing is the complexity of this system is because it has multiple points of assessment for behavior, other in academic, and I'm not sure, there's other social cues that it's looking at. the difficulty is how does the parent come to assess that information? I mean, because before it was a verbal interaction. That if you engage with the teacher would say, yes, your student has a terrible history of handing in assignments late. And there wasn't a grade with, quite often that grade was supposed to reflect that. And that's why they're getting in, because the parents are like, why is my son or daughter or whatever getting a C in this class? They seem to know the content, why are they doing it? And that was tied into the academic score at the same time. So now they would be getting, they're getting a 4.0 on their academic, but they're getting a 1 point whatever on their timeliness or scheduling. And so I think the onus is going to be on the parents, on the teachers and the administrators to explain all these factors, and that's what tomorrow's night meeting is about is that what it's going to be? Okay, because that's what I'm asking for, because it's clarity of understanding what's happening. I think is going to be it's going to be a transition for everyone. So.
Absolutely, and so there's a letter that goes home with the report card that, so like the elementary started doing standards-based report cards a while ago. They have a parent cover letter that goes home and describes each piece of it and what they're looking at and how it goes. At the high school level, where we've had teachers that have been piloting for a couple of years, the communication to families has not been as clear. And the fact that our technology that we use, Skyward and Canvas, are not as tooled to communicate in this way yet has further exacerbated that communication problem. Mr. Madsen and Spenza and Dr. Sullivan are all over that. We're working hard at making sure when parents log in to see their child's performance, they will be able to see all of those different factors, and then we will have that secret decoder ring so that they can see exactly what it is that they're looking at. So it is a significant shift up front, but provides an awful lot more clarity later. So.
And I think, just to elaborate on what Nick was saying, is the goal in the end for a graduate is to have them prepared for the real world. And the thing is, sometimes when something like this, when you see allow multiple attempts and a full credit for late work, the real world doesn't actually necessarily give those chances. And so sometimes when you do it, and this is part of the other, basically to prepare students for real life, is they have to be able to understand that if basically that this doesn't apply outside of school. But I know the school is about the mastering what the subject is. I get that, and I think that when you come and you learn a new job, these do apply to a point. But at some point, this is where every student is probably going to have a different perception of when that should happen. But and that's where a lot of people want to see that happening more towards the end, the senior year. Like this is, this flew for a long time, but now we want to see you guys get, basically finally prepared, and making you prepared for the real world outcomes of, hey, we want you to masters and do this on time and do and behavior you want, you want a 4.0 on everything basically, or whatever, 4. You really, that's what we're striving for, because that means that you basically all the everything that was expected of you meet every expectation. Because if
they don't stand in isolation, right? It's all together for sure.
That's what I'm saying. So all I'm saying is it looks like, and that's where it's difficult too, because when you go and you get your final report card, it's not going to have all the when you get a diploma, it's based on the academic work. It's not based on the behavioral work, is it? Or is that going to be somehow in the report?
No, it will be based
on the academics, because when you do assessment, the state does assessment. They don't really look at the behaviors. They look at the academics. If that's and that's where it comes down to.
But
yes, please.
I would say that a child who's consistently handing their work in late, you're going to see that show up in their academic achievement, unless it's like savant-y, like if you're just playing the odds, your kids that are, they kind of tend to go hand in hand.
It's not a common practice where a student will score higher in ACT and then otherwise.
But as you have heard, these things happen.
Yeah, it does happen. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to elaborate on that one part, because it's part of the whole purpose of, I think, the school is preparing them for the rest of their lives, obviously. So.
Totally agree.
And being on time support, people get fired for being late. And it's
chronically, not the first time. You're chronically
the first
late.
time.
I kind of feel that same way about allow multiple attempts at mastery. There are some jobs that if you make a mistake one time, you may be terminated, but not very many, right? There's a lot, like when I always use this analogy, I heard a long time ago, if you got your driver's license on the 5th try, versus you got your driver's license on the 1st try, is this license worth more power than this one? Nope. This person just demonstrated their mastery a little bit later after more opportunities to practice. So that idea of keep trying and then you can demonstrate mastery. You're just not all going to demonstrate mastery on the exact same day at the exact same time that I was asking.
But on the flip side, your doctor, who does our surgeon.
I said not all docs. I said that, Trent.
You want to make sure, like, well, we didn't quite make that one. You know what I mean? So that's.
I started there.
I just think, like, in general, like, the courses, like, set the bar high and expect more, and hopefully they.
Yeah, and I can say that you can have rigor in a traditional grading system, and you may not.
Yeah.
Rigor is going to occur, or expectations can be, you need to turn this in on time, and that can happen in either system. That's really up to us as teachers, I think, and as educators to set that rigor and that expectation. And then I'm going to give you feedback because you're their child. Hey, when you go out in the real world, you need to be on time, you know, like that type of talk. That's our job as a coach and a teacher.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I'll be back next month with my next.
Thank you very much.
But you're not leaving yet.
You're not leaving
You're
yet.
up next.
All right, next we have Nicole.
Jill, do you mind scrolling down to the second page of this document? So, thank you. I wrote all of my stuff out for this because So this is the curriculum evaluation and review cycle that has been used by the school district for many years. This is a nice visual because it represents the cyclical nature of the curriculum and review cycle, and that it's not just this linear process, that's step 1, step 2, step 3, and so on. During this school year, if we go up to the first slide, or the first page, if you look at 2021-2022 Phase 3, the board presentations that you saw this school year was from K-12 ELA, 6-12 World Language, and 6-12 CTE. And they're in that more of that implementation and monitoring phase this year. And please note that teams, our PLC teams, they move in and out of these spaces that they were planned to be in. For example, in the past years, in this past school year, many of our PLC teams have focused on really reviewing the standards and looking at our guarantees, which is part of phase 2 work. So the work that these teams are doing in reviewing student outcomes will support the standards-based grading that we were just talking about in the previous slide that we are working on as a priority in our school district. So this, looking forward, is kind of the process that we're going to be looking at. In my transition in, I will be really looking at that review cycle that we saw on that second page and working to get those surveys out and more of the stakeholder work activities.
And so as Nicole and I were talking about the new structure of your meetings with those on the even months, we would go back to the other page, Jill. We wondered if for next year it's the it's the K-12 math, K-12 music and art, and K-12 PE. Do you want those to continue? I got you started, Marty, sorry. Do we want those to continue as part of our board meetings, these regular monthly meetings? Or would we want to move, perhaps you want on one of the student success meetings, you want K-12 math, you want all 3 of them on one night to hear that as opposed to separated by the months and how they're stepping through. So that choice is ours to discover. Just thought that we could plant those seeds, right? If we wait a couple months into it, we could do all K-12 math in one of those other meetings. So. Great. Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you.
And I must apologize to the rest of the board. I promised I'd be home at 9 o'clock to my son, so I must go. I apologize. I was hoping it'd be a quicker meeting, but it didn't work out. So please excuse me. Sorry. You can ask.
Next up, we have 8.1, monthly expenditures. Anything that anyone wants to talk about? Hearing none. They were in your packet, I'm assuming. Yes, hearing none, I will entertain a motion.
I move that we accept the monthly expenditures.
I'll make a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Right. Next we have our facility update.
Yeah, the pictures are getting a little bit more exciting, right? They're starting to take shape and look like classrooms that are happening there. So I don't have anything specific to share with you, just that the high school students really were excited to get to walk through those spaces. They got to see all of them then. And Forestry is starting to pick up pace a little bit. Melanie just sent me an email or text, I think, today, which you have to send email because I can't mark it unread. Sent me a text message about the timeline for the end of the year. And so there's a large abatement project that's going to start before school is out so that they can try to keep the pace moving over at Forestry because we're far more concerned about the schedule there than we are at the high school. So.
The internal pictures of what the design is going to be.
Yeah, isn't that fun?
Phenomenal.
Yeah, yep. People are starting to get excited about it. I heard Melanie Cassidy, I didn't realize that they had asked her to leave her classroom for a couple days and teach next door. I didn't realize that happened. And she said, I just keep telling myself it's going to be a bumpy ride for the next couple of weeks, but it's going to be so worth it in the end. So they're handling an awful lot of challenges. So. Any other questions about the facility projects? All right.
All right, next is, I'm assuming Jill with the budget review?
Yeah. So I wanted to take the opportunity to just go through the reports real quickly, give you a better idea, especially Nick, that you're new. What you're looking at, you get those every month in your packet, and so I just wanted to talk a little bit about what you're seeing. We have to prescribe to what's called WUFAR, that's the state accounting system that we use. What's also different than a lot of businesses is that we do fund accounting. So we have to include things within a fund, the revenues and expenditures. It's not just one whole big budget. We have separate funds for all that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. The reports that you get every month are a revenue report, an expense report, and a balance sheet, and cash receipts. And those are from the month prior. So they were in your packet this month. They were as of April 30th. Just want to give you a quick update too about some Fund 10 highlights, things happening with the budget. Our Fund 49, which is our referendum, our project debt, just talked about the facility work a little bit there. And then our debt service, what we're going to do with the defeasance that was approved in October. So WUFAR is the Wisconsin Uniform Financial Accounting Requirements. And so all of our account numbers for all of our funds kind of look like this. They have the 2-digit fund, which talks more generally about what the expense is for. For example, Fund 10 is our general operations fund. The type is expense, revenue, or balance sheet, whatever it might be. The location is something that you don't have to use, but we use internally. So for example, there's a Red Creek budget, there's a forestry budget, we have salary budgets. That is the report, that's the format that you receive the report in right now for expenditures is by location. So that's how you see that, and it's all rolled up into one. There's a lot of detail behind those numbers, behind each line item, but I don't think you want a 300-page report every month either. So that was one way to roll it up and give you a good summary about what's happening in each of those locations. The object or source are the next 3 digits. So object would be if it's an expenditure, source would be if it's revenue, and function or balance sheet number, that gives it further definition. So if something's just general education, it's 110,000 function. If it's specific to transportation, it's 256,000 function. So we use those also to run reports or categorize things that way. And project is if we want more specificity or if we're required to have more specificity. Certain grants have a project number and we have to include that there. A lot of times our account numbers just end with 000 because we don't need that further information. As I said, fund accounting is what we use. So Fund 10 is our general fund, and Fund 21 is where we house our student activity accounts and our gifts that we receive. Fund 27 is for special education. Fund 39 is for our debt service, and that's where we have the levy and the payments come out of for repayment of our debt. Fund 46 is our capital maintenance trust. We referenced that earlier today. That's where we can put funds away for future capital needs. We receive aid on those amounts as we put them into that fund. Fund 49 is our building fund. That's where our referendum proceeds are right now. That's where we're paying for all the bills as for Myron or Bray or whatever it might be. Fund 50 is our food service fund, and Fund 80 is our community service fund. So this is just, I know it's really hard to see, but this is just a little snip of your revenue report, the first few lines of it. And over to the left is the account number. You can see where it says 10R21 and then it says taxes. So that is a roll-up of those two codes, two account numbers for taxes. And then 26, it says non-capital, and gives a description about resale over to the right of it. So that's how that revenue report is developed. It's by each of those kinds of sources that are like sources. We talk about local sources, we talk about intermediate sources, state sources, federal sources. Those are all, you'd see those progressing through that revenue report. And then the first column is the revised budget. So that's the budget that we have right now as approved by the board. And then it gives the monthly activity in the next column, the fiscal year to date activity. So that's since July 1st. So our fiscal year starts on July 1st. And then 21-22 fiscal year to date percent. What that number is showing is what we've collected so far in that revenue of the total budget. An encumbered amount is typically for expenditures. That's for purchase orders that we have out there, reserving those funds. And then the unencumbered balance at the end, that's what's left. In this case for revenue, that's what's left to be collected. So just talking about the revenues, expenditure, it's kind of similar. Like I said, we roll them up into the location. There's lots of accounts under each of those location numbers. Again, the revised budget, the monthly activity, fiscal year to date activity, the encumbered amount are purchases that are out there, reserving those funds. And then the unencumbered balance is the difference between the budget, the fiscal year to date activity, and the encumbrances that are out there. And in this case, the fiscal year to date percentage is showing what is left to be spent, or how much has been spent of the budget. So in the first one, the middle school, that's the actual middle school budget. They've spent 69% of that budget. We have about a third left of it. If you see a negative unencumbered balance, so in this case, the high school activities account, this is all the athletics and clubs and things like that. This is over budget by $314, but I also know that their middle school activities account still has a lot of funds, so I'll have to talk to Mr. Osgard and see if something might have gotten coded in the wrong place as well. Any questions on either of those? That's a lot of information. I put this in your board packet as well, so you have it there to reference it as well. And the balance sheet, the same kind of idea. We have the asset accounts, then liability accounts, and then equity accounts. The beginning, in this case, there's not budgets. There's actually the actual balances that we had to start the fiscal year. So July 1st, for example, cash, we had $915,000. The activity so far has been a negative amount, which means we've typically moved money from investments. But you can see our total assets was $6.8 million at the beginning of the year, and we're down to 4.2. And the monthly activity for April was a negative $1 million. So this is where our fund balance comes into play, helps us get us through these months where we have negative activity in our assets. And the reason for that is we receive state aid, which is our biggest revenue on a quarterly basis. So we receive it in September, December, March, and then in June again. So we have to ride out those months where we don't have that state aid with our fund balance.
And perhaps you hear of other districts who have to do that short-term borrowing. That's because they go through those months where they're not getting state aid and they don't have a big enough fund balance, so they actually have to go take a loan and pay interest on it to be able to continue making payroll and all those pieces in between. Our healthy fund balance allows us to not have to engage in any of that short-term borrowing.
Or cost of the interest to do that, right?
Yeah.
Just a few highlights or lowlights, I don't know what they're called when they're not good. The maintenance and operations costs are up. I'm sure that's no surprise to anybody. Everything costs more right now, right? Gas is dramatically higher than it was last year, and I'll show you a little bit of a graph in a moment. We had a little bit longer heating season this year, and just the increased cost per decatherm is really hurting us financially in that way. Everything from doors to lumber to electrical wire are double to triple in cost, so all those kinds of supplies in the maintenance area, let alone cleaning supplies and paper products, are running much higher than in other years as well.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Like diesel fuel, obviously you guys use a lot for the buses. You guys ever think about contracting it?
So we did look at contracting buses a long time ago. We had a company come in and do a study for us to see if it would be feasible to do that. It wasn't necessarily the cost of the fuel or the cost of the buses, it was the whole operation, the staffing, the time that it takes to do the routes. At that time, there wasn't enough savings to go to a contracted service to do that, so.
Like I know this year, I kind of screwed up. I could have contracted diesel for like $3 something. And now it's like 5, you know?
Yeah.
It's a lot of hindsight and gambling, but I know like a lot of times you can contract it in like January, and then that's like the low part of the year, but just something to think about.
Yep, appreciate that.
But
we do
I don't know if you
buy
can do it.
futures for gas, so we do look at our gas and try to buy futures so that we're getting the best price. We changed a few years ago to buying the gas from a different provider, from a big purchasing consortium
What kind of
instead
gas?
of V Energies.
Oh, like natural gas.
Yes, yeah, natural gas. Other budget areas just that I was pulling out, I saw that legal fees are nearly twice as much as last year and more than what they were 2 years prior for the full year. Salary and benefits are running pretty close to budgeted amounts. Some locations are under budget because we haven't had staff in those positions. So we're actually under budget in some areas as well. So here's our natural gas volatility. So the first part of the chart is September, and the last part to the right here is May. So you can see how much higher gas prices have been. And that certainly impacts our budget. Fund 49, our referendum funds, like I had mentioned. Right now our expenditures are lagging a little bit because we're a little bit further behind at 4th Street. So when we did the original cash flow model, we had expected to have spent more than we have by now. So they will catch up. We're, by August, we'll probably, or September, we'll be on top of that. But right now we spent about $9.95 million of the $23 million that we had received for the referendum bonds. Debt service fund. So in the fall at the annual meeting, the tax levy was set, and it included a $1.2 million defeasance for debt service. And the only thing that we can use those dollars for is to prepay our debt, to pay our debt down faster. We were able to do that and allow our mill rate to drop at the same time. So it was advantageous to do that. So our next steps are to put it into an escrow account and invest those funds. I'd like to do that at the June 13th meeting if we could. And what happens once it's in that escrow account, it will stay in there, and that escrow agent will continue making the interest payments on the bonds, and they're receiving investment income as well. And then by applying those additional funds, the district's debt will actually save approximately $316,000 in interest costs. So by prepaying that debt a little bit quicker, we're saving about $316,000. So one question I had for you, we haven't talked about it lately, is if you want to see those reports in a different format or form at all. As I said, right now they're in the location kind of summary. We can look at object summaries, so we can do it by salaries and benefits and purchase services and supplies and things like that. I guess you'd have to tell me if you want a different format. I'd also like to do multi-year comparisons, and perhaps I'll just devise something and show you next time and see if that's something you're interested in. The only challenge with doing that, comparing it to the prior years, you have those ebbs and flows of grants. They really do fluctuate, especially with the ARPA funds that we've had that really look differently in the future. So, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't look at it too. So, but if there's something you're looking for, please let me know. I'd be happy to do that.
I do like to look at comparisons for budgets. I mean,
Sure.
It just helps me because I don't have enough history on this board to really say what's normal. I read through and I had to open 81 pages. Mm-hmm. If I printed this, you're like, 2/3 the packet. It's just a lot. I mean, I flipped through the whole thing, but I'm just looking for, big ticket items or things that, and that doesn't necessarily.
That one on page 37, right?
Right, there, I think it was 54 actually. But,
Those are the checks. Those are all the checks.
do you really know page numbers? No. What is on page?
No. No, and we're pretty much creatures of habit in our budget. The only thing would be if we reprioritize things, right? So our locations don't change a whole lot. Our salaries and benefits don't change a whole lot. They're gonna go up slightly. All the other locations, those amounts don't change. We don't even give them a cost of living type increase. So there would be some comparisons that you could draw from those.
Yeah, and I don't know how you would, what sorts of bins you would put those in. But yeah, I think that's interesting stuff to look at to see what is changing.
Sure.
Yep.
Like those pieces you pulled out this time, even just to give that overview.
Right, yeah, yep, I guess
Highlights.
numerically, like,
Mhm.
twice what? Twice $100, I'm not
Sure.
concerned, twice $1 million, I'm no
Sure.
concern,
Yep.
Jill, with the rise in price of gas and gasoline, have you heard of any assistance that will be given to school districts because of the hardship that,
I have
because
that.
our buses cover more square miles than most districts.
Yeah.
So just, it's
Nope, I
probably
have
gonna hit
not.
us harder than most.
I have not heard that yet.
I've heard that there were perhaps increased funding for sparsity aid, which has something to do with your buses traveling. We still don't qualify for sparsity aid, so.
We have too many students.
Yeah.
I'd be in Montana for that.
Yeah, right.
Okay, thank you.
That's all I had. I just wanted to go through that, and certainly if you have questions, feel free to contact me anytime.
Thank you.
Will you put up a colored chart of the
Oh, yeah.
state? I included in your packet, we are a part of the Association for Equity and Funding, and I just wanted to share this chart with you because we talk about it oftentimes about being a low spending district, but I'm gonna make her smaller so we can.
Yeah.
We talk about it all the time, and I just wanted to include this chart so that you can actually see it. Here we are, Black River Falls. So back to the buses, we are very large geographically as well, and we are red. And so looking at the chart on top, everyone that is red spends $10,000 or under per student. And now you can't buy student achievement. I'm not suggesting that if we had more money, we would see that significant difference, but we say all the time that our people are the ones that make the difference, not the programs. And so what did we do with our ESSER funds? We bought a bunch more people, and now we're looking at our achievement pieces moving in the right direction. So I just wanted to offer this to you. The only way that we can change our spending per pupil would be with an additional referendum that was just for operating funds. And I'm not suggesting we do this. I just wanted you to see that middle area's got a lot of red. If you look at the top and the bottom, it's not quite as much red. But looking at our neighbors, there's Alma Center, Melrose Medoro is the blue. So those differences, if they are blue, it is $12,000 and over per student. So if you think about that, an additional $2,000 per 1,700 students, that is a significant amount of money every single year. Not like the one-time ESSER funds, but every single year. And so I just think that this is important as we've shied away an awful lot on political advocacy, but this next state biennium budget is going to be a real challenge for schools. We've been through multiple years now of no increase to our per pupil spending because of those ESSER funds that have been available. That spending cliff at the end of ESSER is going to be monumental because they haven't kept up with any cost of living increase. It was all in ESSER funds. So when those ESSER funds go away, we are going to be in dire straits unless the legislature changes the per pupil allocation for us. So I just wanted to share this with you. Again, we were locked in here in 1994 into being a low spending district, and the way that happened was an act of legislature. Nobody got a warning, hey, whatever you spend this year, that's what you're locked in at forever. That didn't happen. Suddenly 1994 came and they said, however much you spent last year, that's how much you need to operate your school district, and that's where we've been locked, except for those small increases.
That's crazy for all those years.
1994. That was my first year teaching, 1994. So you can look across the map and it is not an accident that some of the higher achieving areas are blue, right? They're making a significant financial investment into their staff, into their programs, into all that they do. And I'm not saying the opposite isn't true. There are some that are red that are low spending who are also have amazing student achievement as well. So one does not predict the other. I'm just wanting us to all recognize this, that when we come into this next biennium budget, school funding is going to be a real hot topic. So any questions about that map?
What is our actual number off the top of your
Our
head?
actual number, Jill, I was like 9837, but I think I just made that up.
It's pretty close.
Yeah, it's
It's just under 9,000, or under 10,000.
under 10, yeah. And so for a while with the biennial budget, there was a lot of lobbying for increasing the basement so that they would allow low spending districts to at least get up to the state average. The problem is with so few new dollars going into education, all districts are lobbying for interest for them. And so the School Administrators Alliance kind of defaults to, if we agree to fund more for special education that benefits every single school district, we can all agree, so it's not the low spending districts fighting against the high spending districts lobbying for those same dollars. So they've kind of backed off of a lot of that conversation. But for a while, those low spending districts were getting to take a step up towards the state average, but it wasn't sustained, so. All right, that was all I had on that.
Great. Any other questions? That completes 8.3. 8.4 Policy Committee Board Report. So we have second reading of these policies.
There was there were no questions after last month's first reading, and so I did not make any changes. If you don't have any concerns, they would be ready for final approval.
I make a motion for consent agenda approval of all policies.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. 8.5
Very
is
good.
complete. We have meeting minutes. There were several meeting minutes, I believe, in the packet, correct?
So we met every Monday in April.
Can we approve them all at once?
Yeah, and there's no, we can also do that by consent. Are you making that motion?
I am making that motion.
All right, motion to approve, and this, just so we're clear, April 11th, 18th, and 25th minutes. I will second that one. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right. District admin report?
I just wanted to ask the board if we would be okay not providing that Zoom link for public comment. We're still live streaming, which is more than a lot of districts are still doing. It hasn't been used lately, and it's just another hassle. It makes our agenda a little bit longer when we're reposting it. So with your permission, I'd like to stop providing the Zoom link for that. And I was going to remind you about moving our June board meeting to the 13th and the 27th, and moving our July meeting to July 11th. So both of those meetings are not on the third Monday.
As long as you were talking about the agenda being posted, did we put an extra sentence?
I didn't, because that was conversation, and then the board tabled the rest of it, and so I didn't do that because I wasn't sure if that was you shall, or if that was part of the discussion we were gonna come back to.
We probably should come back to that then, as long as those people wanted that.
Shelley, what was July
11th.
11th to moving it to?
No, it became 11th.
It became 11th, so the July
Previously
meeting.
the 18th.
Yeah. The July board meeting is, instead of the 18th, it's on July 11th. That was
Okay.
already approved at a
Thank
previous board meeting. I was just reminding them as part of the
Okay.
district admin
Should
report.
have June, right?
Yes, June and July are both moved to the second Monday.
And then in August, we have 1st and 15th, is that?
Yes. That's all I have for my report.
WASB?
We had the board member gathering, monthly meeting is coming up, or the bi-monthly meeting is coming up in June. I think I reported that CISA, we have hired Paul Fisher officially have signed him on. He will begin his duties as assistant director this summer. Many districts are in a superintendent search and lack applicants just as the teaching. And there's some of our neighborhood districts are not getting applicants as well that need that. So that's just a concern with WASB statewide. It's never been in history that has happened before, and there are some openings that haven't gotten any applicants. As of years. Yeah, it's all right. Okay, that's all I have.
Any other conference or workshop attendance this month? And school board connections?
I shared with you the agenda for all the spring banquets. I saw several of you Friday night at FFA, saw some of you Wednesday night at the spring banquet. All was well. So those were the opportunities. Graduation, did you all respond to Marty whether, yep, you heard from everyone? Perfect, okay, good. Graduation right around the corner.
Brad Markart and I put bees in his hives last week, Wednesday. There's some sort of event I was supposed to be at, but when living animals want to be in their hives, that's when we do it. So they have, if you guys haven't been out to the school, what do they call that? Land lab.
Land lab.
Out by it backs up to the new animal shelter. That is a phenomenal facility. I am supposed to go out there and get the full guided tour, but they have a mini apiary, which is pretty cool. They've got 2 beehives. He has some ground he's going to put in sweet corn and something else. I forget. He does a crop rotation out there. They have a little rain barrel thing. He's got a hoop house. It's pretty cool. Anything else? All right, future agenda item identification. I think we've got quite a bit for our next meeting already.
I have the action item of the board norms, and I have the gender support plan as a communication tool for board approval. I have the trademark for our logo as an action item, so we can either move forward or put it to rest. And
How about some more info on our agenda with that? Something to add on there?
Sure. I still have that as part of the norms conversation, so I will absolutely add that. Agenda format?
Anything else? All right, moving on. I believe I have to read this whole thing.
You do.
The school board will adjourn to closed session per Wisconsin statutes 19.85 sub 1 sub B sub C for the purpose of considering administrative contracts and employment renewal, non-renewal of employees, including deliberation. And this is a roll call vote. Marty, do you want to do this one?
Sure, yeah. Tom Epps?
Yes.
Troy Webb? Ann Deemer?
Yes.
Mary Jo Radcliffe?
Yes.
Mary Jo Rosanowski?
Yes.
Brad Dobbs?
Yes.
And Nick Helsted.
Yes.
All right, we are in closed session. Let's take a quick break.